Cool. Good to me, man. Yeah, I'm just totally exhausted. I'm on the later show tonight, and I'm taking a nap after this one.
Oh, you're a trooper, man. Both of you.
Yep. Yeah, all set. Merry Christmas, Awesemo NFL fans. What's going on, everybody? Not a show I get to do a lot. Certainly not a show I get to host a lot. But here with you on Saturday, Christmas Day, here with Matt Savoca. He's going to take us through all the ins and the outs of this two-game NFL Saturday slate. But, Matt, how's your Christmas going, man? Everything good?
It's going so well. I'm having a fantastic Christmas with the family. Hope everyone who is here, listening, watching, is having one as well. Enjoying just the time to slow down and just reflect on things. But thrilled to talk some football. Great two-game slate today.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice to take a quick little break, jump into another room, talk a little bit of football, a little bit of DFS and everything, and then go back to the eating and the family and all these different things. And yeah, it's definitely hope that everybody out there enjoyed their Christmas as well. And we appreciate everybody hanging out and joining us here. Make sure you hit the like, the subscribe all the way down there at the bottom of the screen. You guys, you know where to find everything there. We are brought to you today by Prize Picks, or one of our great sponsors. We'll get into them a little bit in a little while. We'll talk about what they do. We'll talk about a great offer they've got going on over there. Make sure when you get over to the site, make sure that you check out our free premium tools and content. We've got some good stuff up on the site today. Week 16 NFL ownership projections and Christmas Day NBA player projections. So the NBA slate tipped. We've already played a game. We're probably a little ways into the second game by now. But if you're making late swaps, you want to be checking those player projections. So that's going to be pretty powerful for knowing the next three games. There was 10 and a half hours between the first game and the tip of the last game today. So there's a lot still there on the bone up the site for free. We're also doing an odd shopper giveaway, guys. So for a chance to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum, just click the link pinned down in the YouTube channel here. I'm sure somebody will drop it in the chat as well. We're giving away 5 of them. So you get 5 chances to win a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum by just clicking that link over to Odd Shopper and checking that out. So we're going to dive in here. We've got a two-gamer to talk through. Mike, I've got some static in my ear. I'm not sure if that's going out over the YouTubes here.
I'm hearing a little too.
Yeah. We'll talk to it. Okay, that might be. There we go. It went away. So, all right, guys. Sorry about that little technical thing behind the scenes there. But we've got a two-gamer. It's kind of an interesting one, I think, when I'm looking at these two games. I think we've got a decent amount of reliably healthy players. We've got a lot of different people who have been who were out, who have come back. So just taking a look at it from that kind of a perspective, Matt, and going into, we'll start with this first game with the Cleveland and Green Bay game. And just taking a look at that, are there any injury concerns that we don't know about? Anything that's still lingering, or anybody that you're really taking note of that's a game changer that may not be in or may have returned?
I think we're good here. We don't really have any big questions with Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry activated last night or yesterday afternoon, I should say. It kind of clears up really most of the uncertainty from this early game. We kind of know what the MO of both teams is going to be. We know that the Cleveland Browns offensive game plan is going to be centered around Nick Chubb. And we know the Green Bay offensive game plan is going to be centered around Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers, how well they can connect. But at least from the Green Bay side of things, we've seen a little bit of shifting from their offensive perspective, getting two running backs involved, and also Marcus Valdes-Scantling, who he is not activated. So I guess we're going to see some more production go to the other players, if not just more Adams.
Makes sense. Yeah. And I think, look, we all know that Adams is going to be a monster in terms of the targets that he's going to get. We know that he's going to be the prime focus for Rodgers. But I do like the fact that we've got a few different pieces and a few different pieces at each position on both of these teams. So it makes it interesting for roster building by getting to some of the pieces from this game. So we're going to talk through them and, looking at the game total, 46.5. It's not the highest total in the world, but it's decent. It's okay. There should be enough points on the board. A 7.5 point spread in favor of the Packers, who are playing at home. Does that sway your opinion at all in terms of what you think this game is going to look like, the shape of the game, the passing game script, the pace that they'll be playing at with that kind of a game total, that kind of a point spread? Does that influence your decision making at all?
It doesn't totally change my decision-making process, especially with a team as stubborn as Cleveland. In terms of our advanced stats tool, it's saying that Cleveland actually feels like more of a rush team than it actually is. In our game-adjusted rush rate, they're actually 14th in the NFL, basically league average. The thing that really gets me down about them is that when they're not favored, they don't tend to push the pace. Or when they're behind, they don't push the pace necessarily. In our game script adjusted pace of play, they're one of the slowest teams in the NFL. So even when behind, they kind of stick to this rush-focused, methodical game plan that kind of lowers the shootout probability. I would like to see Baker Mayfield take some shots downfield to players like Donovan Peoples-Jones. I'm just not so sure we'll actually see it a whole lot.
Yeah, and that's kind of, it does get reflected what you're talking about in terms of the average pace of play that they're at in our tool. We've got them, it's for the season 56.3, but an uptick for this week for the game script adjusted up to 63.9. So that could be interesting in terms of probably going to be behind, probably going to need to throw the ball a little bit and try and keep pace. Whereas the Packers side of things, they're at a 54 on the average. So they're actually a slower pace team, and we're getting a 57.3. So only kind of a minor pace uptick for the Packers, which makes sense. Again, I think if we're expecting them to be playing out ahead, they can get out ahead with a couple quick passes to Davante and then just kind of ground them into dust the rest of the way. So it's going to be interesting from that perspective. Do you have a favored team that you want to get to more of? Like if somebody said, hey, you can only have one of these teams and then you got to use the other game for all the other spots, would you have a preference?
Sure. I'll take Davante Adams and walk out the door from this game to Indianapolis, Arizona. Does that require a whole lot more analysis? I mean,
take Davante off the board. Let's take Davante off the board. Talk to me about the rest of the guys between these two teams then.
I think if that's the case, you've got to go with Nick Chubb. Compared to salary-based expectations, 7,500 on this two-game slate, not terrible. Second highest among running backs. We've got him second highest in projections as well. So in expected fantasy points, he's actually fourth among all running backs on the slate at 14.4 expected DraftKings fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. But knowing his ability, his elusiveness, his breakaway run ability, if you got to take Davante Adams off the board, I mean, in our boom bust tool, in our top plays tool right now, Davante Adams a 69% chance of being in the optimal lineup. So we're taking a huge piece off the board. Then we can go down to a player like Nick Chubb, who's sitting at a 36% chance of being in the optimal lineup, which is still higher than his projected ownership of 32.8%. So that means he still has a positive leverage score in our top plays tool. Still a quality option.
Yeah, for sure. And that's one way I love to parse through these slates, and especially it gets it gets really interesting on the smaller slates when you start getting into those leverage numbers and getting into the ownership. And you see, obviously, Devontae's going to be in so many lineups today. So he's still such a strong play that it kind of overcomes that. And the same's true with Chubb. He's going to be in a ton of lineups, like you were just saying, but just the strength of the play, the overall upside, and the lack of a lot of other options kind of thrusts him beyond that range in terms of the positive leverage score. So yeah, it's rare that you would see a player like Devontae at 64% ownership and a 10.4 positive leverage score. That's bananas, but he's coming up 75% optimal. So, I mean, it's kind of difficult to leave him on the shelf for anybody. Let's talk through the different positions on both of these teams, starting with the away team. What are we thinking about the quarterback here, Baker Mayfield? We know he was out on the COVID list, but apparently he was asymptomatic from what I read, so didn't really struggle, was participating in meetings and everything remotely. So any downgrade to what you expect from Mayfield here, or kind of full go in terms of who he is and what he does?
Yeah, I'm 100%. I think he's going to be 100%. It sounds like he was extremely, extremely frustrated, and I would be too if I was an elite athlete testing positive. He knows the protocols, but he feels perfectly fine. I would be itching to go. In fact, if you could give a little narrative standpoint, maybe he is a little over-rearing to go, because I'm sure he's going to want to prove a point. But PFF says that Green Bay is no slouch defensively. They're one of the top 10 teams in the league right now in PFF's team defensive grades, and it's schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, which is just fantasy points allowed contextualized for the offenses a defense has previously played. They're top 10 in the NFL this season as well. A quality defense, even without their superstar player Jair Alexander in the secondary.
Excellent. So that's so on the Mayfield side of things. If we're thinking in terms of quarterback ranking across the 4 QBs, where do you slot him in 1 to 4 for today?
Man, I hate to say it, but only because of probably salary considerations and the fact that if Arizona brings it offensively, then Carson Wentz is going to be forced into a game script. Then we're going to say that Baker Mayfield is number 4.
Yep. I think that's exactly where I would have pegged him as well. And that kind of aligns with our top stacks, right? If we're looking at the top stacks percentage, 7.1% probability of being the top stack on DK, essentially half that of what Indy is at. And then Indy is half again of what Arizona is. And then you get, you get Green Bay up at the top of the board. So, and there's no leverage on those other teams. So they're basically appropriately owned, where the Green Bay stack, despite being the most popular of the day, is also getting a ton of positive leverage just because they're vaulted up that much higher than a lot of these other teams on the board here. So I think that's, that quarterback ranking makes a ton of sense. Flipping over to the other side, let's talk about Aaron Rodgers. We talked about his primary weapon, the big receiver, Davante Adams, but we know he's got a few other tools in there, and he does, a lot on the field. What do we think of Rodgers, and just in terms of, where he falls on this slate?
Aaron Rodgers is probably the second quarterback for me. I still think the upside with Kyler Murray as a rusher, and the fact that we're talking about a higher total game here. The Indianapolis offense also can bring it offensively, especially with their powerhouse running backs. So Aaron Rodgers, we know that there's a 3-touchdown a 3-touchdown ceiling for him here, but I still think you got to give Kyler the edge. He's number 2 among the 4 quarterbacks.
All right. Interesting there. So vaulting up Kyler a little bit over the top stacks tool. So that was taking 30% top stacks, but significant. Well, not similar ownership. So that's an interesting sacrifice in terms of our stack percentage. I'm curious to see how that ownership actually comes out when it's all said and done between Rodgers and Kyler Murray, because it's pegged right now for very, very similar on the DraftKings slate. So it'll be fun to see how that comes out, and I can easily see that being a determining factor, an inflection point for the slate. So let's move on. Let's jump over, since we just talked about the QBs, we'll jump into the receivers here. We'll jump into some of the pass catchers before we hit the running backs and the defensive side of things. In terms of pass catchers on the Cleveland side, you mentioned Jarvis Landry back on the field, available for them today. Is he your top Cleveland receiver? Is there anybody else that you're really considering? And what do we do in terms of getting different? Because a lot of people are probably going to be going that direction.
He probably is my favorite Cleveland receiver. At the same time, I think that Donovan Peoples-Jones probably has a higher ceiling at a lower salary on DraftKings, $4,400 compared to Landry's $5,300 on that site. In expected fantasy points over the last 6 weeks in the games that he's played, Jarvis Landry has 13.6 expected DraftKings fantasy points. That's the most among all wide receivers on this slate, except for Devontae Adams. So I would say that there's probably enough usage overall to justify that 5,300 wide receiver 3 salary on DraftKings. But if you're looking for that differentiation option, I do think DPJ is a solid play, and you could still go to those tight ends. I mean, I don't love the fact that Austin Hooper and David Njoku kind of take away from each other's touchdown probability, but I think you definitely have to include them as part of the main receiving core in Cleveland.
Absolutely, yeah. When I'm talking pass catchers, I throw the tight ends and the wide receivers kind of just into the same mix and take what I get. But I do look at tight ends a lot more touchdown dependent in most cases. I've talked about this on other shows. Unless you're getting to a target monster type tight end, and especially with these two guys, I think you do need that to get that touchdown. Do you have a preference between the two tight ends in terms of who might get that touchdown? Who seems a little bit more likely, or is it kind of a coin flip?
Ooh, it's tough. It's tough. Let's check the red zone target share over the last, say, like 6 weeks here from this team. It's honestly a true toss-up in terms of expected fantasy points. So we're really just seeing who's going to get usage at the goal line. Austin Hooper has 3 red zone targets, and Njoku has 2 since week 10. Oh. This is like a true coin flip situation.
Yep, coin flip of all coin flips, and they've both got 3 TDs on the year. So I mean, there are very few things to differentiate the two of these guys. So yeah, I think it comes down to a bit of a roster building question. Then whoever fits, and whoever if you're taking certain shares of different plays, you want to make sure you're mixing some things up in there, of course. But yeah, as we're looking across to you mentioned Peoples-Jones. I'm just taking a look at some of the receiving stats. And what jumps out to me about Peoples-Jones between the wide receivers is his average depth of target, 15.6 yards. It's basically double the average depth of target that Landry gets. His yards per target, 11.12 on the season compared to the 6.4 for Landry. So you're seeing Peoples-Jones is just more of that deep threat, that long ball threat where you can pick off a deep touchdown and kind of get to a score that is going to be difficult to replicate in other players. Is that why you're looking at him?
Yeah, I mean, if he catches passes, I mean, in my opinion, I think he made Nick Mullins' stat line look worse than it should have been last week because he was dropping dimes that were thrown his way, deep passes on the sideline, but still, he's running a different route tree than Jarvis Landry, and certainly different than the typical tight end. I know Cleveland likes to use tight ends uniquely, but not that uniquely. He is the deep threat on this offense. So, obviously, for other players, it could take just one deep shot to change that opinion. We've had David Njoku score from way far out. I believe it was against the Chargers in week 5. But ultimately, if you're looking for a deep threat on Cleveland, it's Donovan Peoples-Jones only.
Yep, that was who I was actually looking at. I think I switched up between the tight ends and went back over to Peoples-Jones on you there, and I probably talked mushmouth my way through it. So yeah, those stats were Peoples-Jones that I was looking at there. Any love for Rashad Higgins, one of these other guys who's going to be on the field, but not necessarily the most involved in this passing offense? Or they just kind of dart throws for large field tournaments?
Yeah, I guess like Higgins played 78% of snaps and saw 5 targets. He saw more usage than Demetric Felton, more usage than Harrison Bryant, but I still put Higgins in that Felton Bryant dart throw play on a 2-game slate. Maybe I would feel differently about him on a single game slate. No red zone usage. Obviously, with so few options at every position, I'm never going to say, especially in a large field tournament situation, that no one is playable, especially one that's playing on 3/4 of their team snaps. But Higgins has not shown big playability to make him a priority option at all.
Yeah, it's been a little bit bumpy there. And yeah, for me, the rest of that receiving core is essentially just mix and match dart throws. Where I need price or wherever they fit in, I'll take it, but it's not something I'm getting excited about. When we're talking about this passing game, how many of these receivers are you willing to put in a lineup? Like if you're saying, all right, I'm going to go Baker, I want to build a Cleveland stack here. Are we willing to go 2 receivers, or are you maybe looking to go like Baker, receiver, and a running back from the Cleveland side? What's your roster construction if you're going to this team?
Yeah, I don't mind getting to 2 receivers. I think this is a situation where, similar to a showdown slate where we only have 2 options, obviously we're doubled here, but I think I would kind of throw sort of the fundamental main slate rules out the window just a little bit. I'm fine, especially if I'm playing a player like Jarvis Landry, who I'm playing him because I think he could have a ceiling game, which usually involves something like 8 to 12 targets, then I don't mind putting a deep threat on top of that. That could absolutely happen here. Baker Mayfield can throw 35 times, 10 to 12 times to Landry, 5 to Donovan Peoples-Jones, 2 deep passes connect, and they both hit. So I'm fine with 2 pass catchers, even though in a main slate situation, I'm probably skinny stacking Browns if I'm looking to game stack them.
Yeah, that would be my approach as well with the main slate, but that's not where we're talking. We've got limited options here, so I think it makes sense to consider the extra guys. Would it be fair to say? I mean, it probably is a stupid question because we ranked Mayfield 4th out of this, and they're our 4th ranked stack. But this would be the team you'd be least inclined to go to multiple receivers from and build that stack with, though. I think, right?
I would say it's least inclined, which means that it's probably the place where the ownership will be lowest. If you're thinking about something like a Millie Maker, no stack is off the table when the worst you can be is 4th.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, look, we're talking about a 7 and change percent chance of being the top stack of the day. So it's not nothing. There's certainly something there to chew on. As far as just looking at the rest of this, anything that we haven't covered on the Brown side of the ball, or should we switch over to the Packers side?
They do like to use 3 wide receiver sets, so we haven't mentioned Harrison Bryant's name really much at all, but he will be involved. He is 2.5K, and all you really need at that price is a target or 2 in the end zone, and you're good to go.
There you go. Like that one, a little bit of a dart throw, and love the minimum price or the 2,500 price. That is bare bones. And just looking at some of those price discrepancies from site to site, does anybody really stand out to you as a better play one site to the other site? Do you have both sites pricing up, or are you just looking at DraftKings?
I was just looking at DraftKings at the moment, but that makes a great point. Let me pull up our top plays tool and make sure I can talk about some of the better options there.
Sure, absolutely. While you do that, I will remind everybody that we're brought to you by Prize Picks, and you guys can hit the like and the subscribe button down there for us. It helps us out a lot, helps you not miss our shows. And just to throw something else out there for you guys real quick, we're running a good promo. It's $1 access to our NBA Express weekly plan. That's the Express plan. It's our entry-level product. Gets you access to our rankings, gets you access to our showdown and single game slates, the full-blown projections. So you get a lot in there for if you just want to check out the site and kind of get a feel for what we're doing and how we go about these things. The promo code for that is Frosty, like the snowman. All caps, one word, Frosty. And that gets you access to the NBA Express weekly plan for $1. So go check that out over on the site. It's valid only through today. So if you miss it today, you don't get to take advantage of it for the rest of this week. Was that enough filler for you?
Yeah, you did well. Honestly, I think I would play Donovan Peoples-Jones more on FanDuel. That's where I'm looking.
At the 5,800 price?
Yeah.
I like that. And yeah, definite downtick from some of these other receivers on both teams. It's a nice price. Like I'd be much more inclined to pay that than some of these others. Even the 6,600 on Landry, that I think makes Peoples-Jones very, very interesting there. So switching sides here, let's take a look. We'll go over to the Packers side. We touched on Aaron Rodgers when we talked about the quarterback position. Excuse me. We haven't talked the running backs yet on Cleveland. My bad. We need to do that. Let's jump over here. And so let's go through as far as I know we talked about Chubb, but is there anything specific stat-wise, game flow-wise that we didn't touch on that you really want to bring up? And then is there anybody else that we're looking at in terms of a running back from the Cleveland side? Are we at all interested in D'Ernest Johnson here?
I think you could play D'Ernest Johnson in the Millie Maker or something like that and really nowhere else. As we were talking about as we started to break down this game, the Browns have shown a propensity to stick to the run game, a slow, methodical, run-focused approach all season long. And so I do think with Kareem Hunt out in this game, you're pretty much guaranteeing 20 total opportunities. And would you be surprised if you saw 25 to 30 total opportunities for Nick Chubb in this contest if this game stayed close? I certainly don't think so. I think 5 targets is in the range of outcomes, although I was disappointed to see them still using a third down back for no reason, in my opinion. We know that from an ability to break tackles and break away from would-be tacklers, Chubb is pretty much the best runner in the game right now, except for maybe Jonathan Taylor. So I don't really look at Chubb's 20 touches in a run-focused offense as the same as I look at 20 touches just from a general running back. He's better than that, period.
Makes sense. And on the Johnson side, somebody in the chat asked, so I just jumped over to the my target board here. They asked about Johnson and any potential involvement in the passing game. And I know you just went through it in terms of the touches, and I agree. I think most of that's going Chubb's way. Johnson got one target last week. It was a bye week. Then he wasn't on the field. It looks like in week 10, he had 8 targets. That was a week with no Chubb. That was a week with no Hunt. I expect that that's the reason why he saw those targets. Is there any thought that he might see even 3 targets in this game?
I do think that a 5-target game is the rational coaching choice that the Browns should
for
make.
Johnson.
Oh, for Johnson.
For Johnson. Yeah,
I'm so sorry. Sorry about that. I missed the switch over to the player.
Yep.
Yes. I will say that there is a possibility.
Okay.
Because the way that the Cleveland coaching staff has decided to use 2 backs this season has not been rational, as I was saying earlier.
Right.
But I do think it would be more rational, at least if I were the one making the decisions, to give that passing work over to Nick Chubb. Certainly no guarantee of that. If you're playing D'Ernest Johnson, that's what you're really hoping for, right? 3 to 5 dump offs and 1 to 3 goal line carries, and you're good to go. We call those quality opportunities, carries inside the 10 and any kind of target anywhere on the field. And Johnson is getting that. That's why you see 7 expected fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks, even as a number 2 back here. It's not nothing. It's closer to a wide receiver 2 on this 2-game slate.
Love it. And just looking in terms of, you brought him up, so I gotta put them side by side now. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor, and we'll go back to Nick Chubb here real quick. Side by side, if you could only have one on this slate, which one do you prefer?
Oh, Jonathan Taylor. I didn't smoke that much before the show. My goodness.
Making this too easy on him today. It's Christmas. We got to take some easy questions here. Yeah, I was just looking at it in terms of our boom bust tool, the probabilities here, and we're looking at Chubb for all the good things we've said about him, a 4.7 boom score probability, because he's priced fairly appropriately at that 7,500 mark. That's putting him in pretty solid range for what he's expected to do. So we're expecting around that median projection. Where you look Jonathan Taylor for 8,800, a 14.2% boom score probability. There's just that big game upside going to Taylor. 66% optimal lineup rate on DK for Taylor, still squeezing out a little bit of positive leverage. And honestly, we're getting positive leverage on many of the top backs here. So it's just a matter of finding the right combination of these guys, I think, and as you're mixing and matching through them. How many, if you're building 150 lineups on DK, how many of them have both Taylor and Chubb in them?
Ooh, I don't have an exact number yet. I haven't quite finished building it out, but a whole lot of it. And actually, I'm glad you bring up that question, because from a macro perspective, that's actually where our tools are telling us to go. Find ways to get Devontae Adams and Jonathan Taylor, if at all possible, into your lineup, and then go off the wall with your other plays here, because after you get past those two, are we really that excited about players like Michael Pittman or Jarvis Landry? I think Chubb probably differentiates himself into a 1B tier, but it is significantly lower than that 1A tier. So ultimately, I think I'm going to see how I can fit as much of them together into my lineups because of that positive leverage score on both players.
Yep, absolutely. Positive leverage score. I think we can certainly expect there's the multi-touchdown upside. There's a lot of different reasons to take a look at that. And then, yeah, like you said, if you're spending up a decent amount, it's going to differentiate you in the mid-range. So you're going to have to take some dart throws in some bigger field tournaments. But I think that's conducive to success on this kind of a slate where we've only got 2 games to work with. Everybody's going to be, all the public is lazy today. They're all sitting around Christmas table and just building a few lineups by hand. Probably this is how I envision the public. I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm insulting people out there, but I'm thinking there's a lot of people who are just going to be riding a lot of the heavier chalk today. So if you're making a couple decisions, put the foundational pieces of chalk into your lineup and then just differentiate with a few different plays. I think you can get very different very quickly, even on a 2-game slate with some of those more respectable dart throws. Like, I don't think you have
like
to go
one of those, one of those
deep.
3 tight ends, right?
There you go. Exactly. That's a great way to do it and create a little bit of a rotation of those guys. And hopefully you land that in the right lineup with a combination of a couple other guys who hit and off and running to success. And that's how we differentiate. It's all about differentiating on these small slates. Anything else from the Cleveland side of the ball? I know I asked you that before, but we sidetracked there and had to cover the running backs. Anything we didn't touch on Cleveland?
Demetric Felton will probably get a couple gadget plays here and there. He probably takes away from D'Ernest Johnson's ultimate ceiling projection, but those two are dart throws anyway.
Makes sense. And that's a pretty solid, almost a half hour on the Cleveland side of the ball. So we'll hit the gas a little bit here on the Packers. We talked about Aaron Rodgers. Everybody knows about Davante Adams. If you have anything specific that you want to call out stat-wise on Davante Adams, please do. But just in general terms, let's talk about the Packers passing game and the other receivers that you're interested in. You mentioned no MVS for this one. Does that put you more into Lazard, Equanimeous St. Brown? Who are we looking at as that replacement for MVS there?
Well, I guess we should talk about who the replacement is, but I think it just increases the probability if we see a dozen or more targets for Davante Adams. And, we saw the Ravens come out after the game last weekend, that Ravens-Packers game that turned out to be a great one, with Tyler Huntley now on the COVID-19 list, surprise starter last week. I digress. They said, Baltimore did, that they were doing everything in their power to let anyone except for Davante Adams beat them. And then he ended up getting 7 targets, catching 6 of them, including 1 in the end zone. So he ends up with only 44 receiving yards, but still a really solid double-digit fantasy scoring game. I think that's sort of right in his median range of outcomes. That's honestly probably on the low side. We obviously could see the Cleveland defense do their best to shut down Davante Adams, but I think that you see at least 10 targets go his way. From there, I probably would say Lazard is the player who gets the biggest bump. He was already at a 80% snap share compared to a 66% snap share to MVS before this. And now the only other dart throws I would say are like Josiah DeGuara, Mercedes Lewis. You're getting really far down the list. Equanimeous St. Brown cleared concussion protocol, but yeah, those are dart throws compared to Davante Adams, believe it or not. It's this Rodgers-Adams stack, and I think the real interesting differentiation option, if you're looking to be contrarian in tournaments, is really these running backs, not these other receivers.
Okay, so we'll move on and we'll jump into the running backs. In terms of, just before we do that, though, in terms of the Adams and the pairing in the passing game with Adams and Rodgers, how frequently are you going to have Aaron Rodgers without Davante Adams in a lineup out of 150 lineups?
It's probably going to be pretty rare. I'm probably going to put a very simple group in that every time Rodgers is in the lineup, just boost Davante Adams' projection a certain amount, because the way he gets there, it's obviously there is in his range of outcomes. If you played the slate over 1,000 times, sure, Rodgers could have 3 touchdowns. You saw that game with Aaron Jones with 4 touchdowns in a game. Sure, it could happen, but so often the way that Rodgers gets to a ceiling game involves bringing Adams with him to a ceiling game. So it's probably going to be pretty rare. His expected ownership's around 37%. I expect to be right around the field. I don't think maybe 10%, 20% of those lineups will be Rodgers with other people. That'll be specifically fading Adams in those lineups.
Okay, 20 was actually higher than I was expecting to hear. So that's interesting. I'd be curious to take a look through where those lineups went and what the constructions look like. Because, I mean, if you're not spending that money for Adams, it opens up things that you can do in different ways. But we talked about, I mean, that's a major, major sacrifice of potential fantasy points. Mm-hmm. So talk to me about these running backs. You brought up the running backs on the Green Bay side. We've got Aaron Jones. We've got A.J. Dillon. What are we thinking the breakdown looks like? What are we thinking the preference is in terms of DFS upside?
Oh, this is the worst, guys. This is the dreaded hot hand approach that we hope that coaches don't say. I will say it looks to me like the coaching staff wants to get A.J. Dillon involved and keep him involved. I was watching NFL matchup with former NFL player Matt Bowen breaking down some of the rushing game choices that the Green Bay Packers have been making as of late. And they're clearly starting to think of A.J. Dillon as that late season, late quarter hammer that could be very effective as this team tries to close out the number 1 seed in the NFC. That doesn't mean they're going to stop using Aaron Jones's playmaking ability. They're still going to prefer Jones in the receiving game, but I think you could start to see something like a 65-35 rushing split with Dillon in the lead here. So I certainly don't know anything that the beat writers or anyone else doesn't know, but I just think that we're seeing a shift here. They'll find ways to use Jones, but Dillon is not going away.
So that's really compelling when we look at the pricing. Aaron Jones, 6,800 on FanDuel, 7,300, or excuse me, 68 on DK, 73 on FanDuel. AJ Dillon, 5,600 on DK, 6,200 on FanDuel. That's a pretty major price discrepancy between the two backs, especially if the carries go that way or the touches go that way. And Dillon coming up on the DK slate, 26% owned as compared to 38.7 for the more expensive Jones. That seems to be an inefficiency by the field that can be targeted. Is that something that you're really looking to hammer on, getting a lot of AJ Dillon and getting over the field on AJ Dillon in your lineups on DK?
I think so. We're seeing a positive leverage score of over 6% right now on DK, and on FanDuel, it's over, it's just at 1% here. Excuse me, 2.5% actually. Yeah, so I'm probably on both sites going to be playing that game a little bit. I will say I'm not going to be fully fading Aaron Jones by any stretch. I do think we're going to see situations where if Aaron Jones breaks a few long runs, he suddenly is going to gain more playing time. So I want to have lineups that include that scenario happening. But one thing I was talking about with Laffy earlier this week, that Aaron Rodgers has been very vocal about trying to break the record of who has the most touchdowns as a pair, quarterback and wide receiver, in total touchdowns in Packers history. Right now, Devontae and Aaron Rodgers are tied with Jordy Nelson and Aaron Rodgers. I do actually think this is a narrative that you can actually play into. I would not be surprised if they passed to Adams 3 straight times at the goal line, if they got close early on and just got it over with on Christmas Day.
Sure, makes sense. And that's something that I only like narratives when there's something where it's directly in someone's control, right? A point guard in basketball can say, all right, I'm just going to take every shot here. I'm just going to call my own number. All right, I'm calling that guy's number because I know you can get there with that. You can get there with a quarterback just saying, hey, all right, I am going to force feed the ball here at the goal line to a player like this. So yeah, I mean, just extra reason to pay attention to that combo. You mentioned the tight ends. Any preference on the tight end side of things between DeGuara and Mercedes Lewis, the ancient 37-year-old Mercedes Lewis?
Yeah, can you believe it? Mercedes Lewis is still someone we're talking about. I mean, good for him.
Yeah,
both of them played over a 50% snap share last week, which actually leads me to believe that they're interested in being a team that can run effectively. When you have two tight ends on the field, you get into a blocking advantage that you wouldn't otherwise. And when your focus so much is on one primary outside wide receiver, why not differentiate yourself? Go into two tight end sets so you can then create mismatches with play action and things like that. I will say DeGuara is the one who's had more air yards or had more air yards last week, but it was 10-7 and the targets were 5-3. I think that's sort of the stat line we're kind of looking at for either player. If you told me at the end of the day it was 5-3 and 10-7 air yards in favor of Mercedes Lewis, that would be equally appropriate, I think.
Yeah. So kind of another one where we're looking at a little bit of a toss-up between some tight ends here, and probably, I think, again, hoping to get that touchdown right. And maybe it's the one where he doesn't throw it to Devontae on the 4th or 5th one. He's got his 3, and then he goes to Mercedes Lewis. Any love for either defense in this game? I mean, we're going to have to play a defense from somewhere in these spots, and only 4 teams to choose from. I imagine probably not going to much of the Cleveland side of things, but for the Green Bay side, any interest there?
Yeah, I do have interest there. 2.7K for them. They're the second highest salary defense, but we have them as the highest projected defense. I think the only problem is that a lot of people are seeing them as an obvious play. In over 50% of the projected lineups right now, they'll be owned. So we have them as the optimal defense 48.7% of the time. That ends up being a negative leverage score, but not by a whole lot. I think that if you differentiate yourself in other ways on this slate, you can certainly play the chalk defense. The Packers look to be in a good spot.
Yeah, and that's one to me where, coming up that frequently optimal 2.9%, or I'm not really going to sweat the leverage. I consider that just kind of a plug and play building block type of a move to drop them in there. And then since we're not getting like a major salary discount on any of these defenses with everybody priced basically the same, it's not like you get a ton of upside out of or savings out of going to the Cleveland side of things. I guess you can offset some ownership. They're coming in 12% owned compared to like the Colts at 16, the Cards at 19. But I don't know that I don't prefer the Colts or the Cards, even with that minor ownership. Would the Browns rank fourth on the board for you here as well?
Yeah, they probably do rank fourth for me. And you're not getting a salary discount, especially on DraftKings.
Yeah,
They're the same
and that's
price,
the thing that stands out. Right, yeah. If they were like 2,200 somehow or something like that, then maybe there's a little bit of interest. But at the same price, it doesn't really jump out to me. Anything else? We've spent plenty of time on this game. We'll go through the other one. We've got to clean up a quick little business. Anything else you want to call out from this game before we move on?
I think we're good to go here.
I think we did a nice deep dive. We did the show's name pretty proper there. So, guys, we're brought to you by Prize Picks, like I mentioned at the top of the show. If you're not familiar yet, we talk about these guys multiple times a week. So if you haven't checked them out yet, you're missing the boat. They have daily prop-based contests. There's no sharks. There's no optimizers. There's no mass entries. All you have to do is build a prop card. It's prop-based picks. You build a 5-player card. If you get all 5 of them right, it nets you up to 10 times your entry fee. You can also miss one. It's not like taking a 5-way parlay with player props. And if you miss the first one, your lineup's just dead. Your card's dead for the rest of the night. Even if you hit 4 of them, you've still got action if you miss that first one, if you miss another one. So there are many ways to win. It's a great site, a lot of fun to play on. We're a big partner with them. You can download them in the App Store. You can download them on Google Play. You can play directly on prizepicks.com. We are running a promo with them. We're running multiple promos with them. We've got a free play. We've got the big one. 1 month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at Prize Picks. You get an email from us within 24 to 48 hours after redeeming your code. So we get a note from them, but you're going to have to take a step there if you haven't gotten the automated email and just write into us at support@awesemo.com and we'll help you out. But it should be an automated process where it just comes through after you've done your fulfillment. On top of that, Prize Picks is running a Christmas special. They've been doing these all week long where they're just giving you a free square on every lineup card. Today's Christmas special is LeBron James. And Matt, I want you to weigh in on this one. Do you think LeBron James will score more than 0.5 real life points today?
Yes. Yes, I do.
think unless he trips over the sideline and is unable to take the
Please don't tell us the scenario he doesn't do it, please.
Yeah, that's true. We shouldn't be, not in the NBA, we shouldn't be doing that these days. But that's a free square, right? They give you that off the top. So you can plug that in, and now you're only looking to build a 4-pick card with your own picks. So it's great. We've got picks up on the site where we go through, we give you the probabilities, Alex's projections. It's a killer site. So check out prizepicks.com and make sure you're up and running over there. We're going to jump into the next game here. Mike, we'll probably bypass the Hall of Fame. Let's focus on the games. The Hall of Fame, guys, Awesemo Hall of Fame. Everybody probably has heard about it by now. If you are in the top 3 in a contest with more than 5,000 entries and you've got our logo as your avatar on the site, whatever site it is out of the 3 majors, send it our way. Tweet it at Awesemo Hall of Fame, Awesemo HOF, and that'll also be a good way to get you a free month. So you do that, you tweet it out over the screenshot of it over to us, and then you write into our customer support desk and we'll set you up with a promo code for a free month. Top 3 in a tournament of more than 5,000 entries to qualify for that. We're going to jump over to the other game here. We've got Indy, we've got Arizona. We've got a 48.5 total, and we've got a pretty competitive line. It went up by a point since when I first wrote it in here. But we've got Arizona coming in at 2.5-point favorites, so it's essentially just the home field. 48.5-point game total. Should be some meat on the bone here. What do we like from a 50,000-foot view before we dive into each position? How do you expect the game to flow? What do we expect it to look like?
Oh, I really am hoping for an offensive, focused game plan from both teams. I'm hoping that Arizona tries its hardest to get out of that slump it found itself in against Detroit, and Indianapolis riding that high with that big win against the New England Patriots, tries to come out and just dominate the game in the trenches. I know Quentin Nelson's on the COVID-19 list. That definitely is a big blow, but at the same time, when you got Jonathan Taylor, you got a running back who can create on his own. And so once he bursts through the hole at this point, I think Jonathan Taylor is probably the best running back in the open field in football right now. And Arizona, yes, it was bad last week, but even without DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray, with his throwing ability and his ability with his legs, has the highest ceiling of any player on the slate in terms of just raw fantasy points here. I think I'm really hoping that we have two 25-point scores or more here from this game, especially if it's a shootout.
That would be definite upside, and that would be a lot of fun too for this evening game. So I'm hoping for that. I'd love to see this one go way over as well and just get a nice fun shootout type of a game. And I think there's the weapons on both sides to be able to do it. There's enough talented skill players. I don't think Carson Wentz is the best quarterback in the league by any means, but he's capable. We've seen him do it before, so I think they could keep pace here. So let's dive in on the Indy side. We'll go to the visiting team first and pick up and run with that one. What do we think about Carson Wentz here? What do you think about Carson Wentz here?
I think that Carson Wentz will throw as much as the game script requires him to throw. That's really what I think. In game script adjusted rush rate, which just takes the team's pass rate and contextualizes it for how much they're winning or losing and how much time is left on the clock, Indianapolis is the 7th most rush-focused team in the NFL. They just want to rush and rush and rush, and in adjusted pace that, again, contextualizes for where the game is. They are dead last in game script adjusted pace. So all of those demerits we gave to the Cleveland Browns, we have to give to the Indianapolis Colts as well. The difference, of course, is they have the best running back in football right now. So Carson Wentz still has a solid ceiling here. He's in the optimal lineup 21% of the time. Like, he's a quarterback on a 2-game slate. Like, you can still play him. He's 3rd of 4 in our QB projections, but ultimately, I think he's risky because if Indianapolis finds himself in a close game or certainly ahead, they're just handing the rock off as much as they can.
Absolutely. How could they be blamed in that situation if they're ahead? And definitely makes sense with a guy like Jonathan Taylor that they're going to lean into that rushing game script. On the pace note, it is interesting just looking at their 53.3 on the average for the season. They're going to be hopefully lifted up by that Arizona pace at a 64.8, major pace differential between the two teams. And that's reflected out in our game script adjusted pace for this week. We've got Indy jumping from that 53.3 to a 61.8. So that's a major pace up spot for them, whereas Arizona goes 64.8 to 66.9. So it's Arizona playing around their usual kind of a pace, but a major, major pace up spot on the Indy side of the ball. As far as Wentz's receivers, do you have a preference? And somebody in the premium Discord earlier asked if we have a line on who we think is going to get more targets between Michael Pittman and T.Y. Hilton. So do you have a preference between those two, and which one do you think sees more targets tonight?
Yeah, I do. I prefer Pittman. In fact, our tools are leading us to say that Pittman might be the best value option on the slate compared to salary-based expectations. At 5,100, wide receiver 4 on DraftKings, we have him at wide receiver 2 in our projections. He needs a solid, say, like 15, 16 points to really feel like you got value, a 3x value. But right now, he's in the optimal lineup, basically a coin flip chance on DraftKings, 49% or so here. So that's more than his ownership projection. I don't think T.Y. Hilton is a bad play at 3,900 on DraftKings, but I do think I'll probably just be right at or above the field, like 15% ownership. I really am playing Hilton because of him breaking a tackle and making one big play, then suddenly out-targeting Michael Pittman.
Yeah, I think I totally agree on the targets. I think that's the direction that they head more often. What is kind of compelling that just jumped out to me as I was looking down the board for 3,900, T.Y. Hilton under 10% ownership right now in the latest projection, latest ownership update that I got. There might be a fresher one on the site. I grabbed this right before the show, but that's at least compelling based on almost exactly what you said. Just breaks that one and gets into the end zone on a decently long play. He doesn't have to be the highest scoring player on the slate, especially not at 3,900. You can get just one big play out of him and be pretty cozy at that 10% ownership. So that's somewhat interesting to me. And you look, Zach Pascal for only 400 less is getting owned more. Does that make sense to you? Do you think it's price driven? Or do you think people kind of leaning into Pascal here a little bit and liking him a little bit more than T.Y. Hilton?
Man, I think any sort of confidence in knowing where the Indianapolis passing game is going to go on a game-by-game basis outside of Michael Pittman is probably a fool's errand. So in that case, we could just use the game theory the simple game theory of saying play the lower owned, low probability play, since they both have about the same probability of getting into the optimal lineup. What is it, 19% and 18%? Yeah, just go with the lower owned player.
Yep, I like that. That's a great way to just kind of cut through some of the noise sometimes, is just say, all right, these guys, everything I'm looking at here is equal. Just, hey, this guy's owned less and they're around the same price. Let's plug in the lower owned guy and get a little bit different than the field. And you mentioned, trying to guess where the ball's going. We hadn't even gotten to the tight ends when you said that. But which one of these tight ends is catching the touchdown today?
Oh, of course I know which one is catching the touchdown. Let's look at this. I guess Jack Doyle in terms of expected fantasy points, which I really love as a volume metric, because not only does it take into consideration things like targets and rushes, it takes into consideration where on the field they were. And so you'll see players who are used at the goal line naturally boosted up in that stat. And right now, over the last 6 weeks, Jack Doyle is at 7.2 expected fantasy points per game, and Mo Alley-Cox is sitting at 3.1 expected fantasy points per game. So when you got that sort of double the opportunity value, I'm just going to go with Doyle despite him being $200 more in salary. I bet I can swing 2.7K on DraftKings instead of 2.5.
Yeah, I imagine you could find the way to save money and pay for that extra $200. And look, you're talking about guys with very, very similar optimal lineup rates. And if you get that edge in the nature of the opportunities that he's seeing for Doyle at less ownership, 17.4 for Mo Alley versus a 13.7 for Doyle. That makes a lot of sense to go to Jack Doyle in that situation. Then again, we're just kind of leaning into the guy with less ownership, but you've got some football-based reasons for doing it as well there. So I really like that idea of spending the extra 200. I would get shares of Mo Alley-Cox certainly across a decent amount of Indy stacks, but I think I would lean into the Doyle preference there as well. As far as the running backs go here, we know that you love Jonathan Taylor here. There's every great reason in the world to do it. The 8,300 is a good price on him. Any love for Nyheim Hines on the other side of this one? Do you think he gets involved in the passing game at all? Is there enough volume for him to do something and make enough noise to be slate relevant here?
Sure. I think also you can, I saw this on the chat earlier, you can do crazy things on a 2-game slate, like play Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines together. Their ceiling game is more, them getting to a ceiling game together is so low probability that you would never choose to go for it on a main slate. But we only have so many probabilities that we can choose to act upon here. So why don't we, differentiate ourselves by adding Nyheim Hines? I think also when you have a player like Taylor who's going to be in over 50% of lineups, then just simply pivoting away, whether that means going to another running back or just going hard into the Indianapolis passing game, those are two easy ways to be contrarian here. So basically from a game theory standpoint, Nyheim Hines is playable here. But he's got enough usage, even goal line rushes here over the last few weeks, to say, like, yeah, on a 2-game slate where you don't have a ton of running back value, decent value, you could definitely play him.
Yeah, why not? And you took the question right off my board. I was going to ask about playing them both together. That's one of my, on a small slate, and we've talked about it on showdown shows that I've been on recently. Playing the 2 running backs from the same team, I think is something that people are very, very remiss to do, just because of, like you said, how we normally build lineups and the considerations that we normally have for much larger slates with many more options, where a guy coming in and just booking you like 8 fantasy points is probably not going to help you win a tournament. In this situation, that could, and you're going to be very different, I think, by putting both of those guys into the lineup. So I like that call a lot. I think we've touched on everything on that side. Anything else to call out from the Indy side that we didn't cover yet?
I think we covered it well. I do actually think that the Colts defense is a solid tournament play. We saw the floor for the Arizona offense. Maybe they actually still are going through some growing pains without DeAndre Hopkins. James Conner's been injured all week, but he's still going to play. Maybe the Colts kind of find the Cardinals off balance. And I think, especially because they are the highest salary defense on DraftKings, they make for a solid tournament play, especially.
Yeah, pay up a little bit and get a little bit different with it. That makes some sense. And look, we're talking about, again, it's another slate. It's just bears repeating. You don't need a ton of production. They've only got to be better than 3 teams, and they're all going to be in what we think are at least, relatively. We can, if you knock Cleveland off the board, they only have to be better than 2, and all 3 of those teams are in relatively competitive situations. So I think it's an interesting spot there to get different. So let's jump over to the Arizona side and talk about that offense you were just throwing the defense against. We've got the quarterback, Kyler Murray. You talked about him a little bit in terms of the passing acumen, in terms of his ability to get things done on the ground. Is there anything else to call out about Kyler in this specific situation, in this specific game that you want to mention?
First in this slate in expected fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. You would expect that from a player who's constantly flirting with first in real fantasy points per game at his position. At 7,400 on DraftKings, I certainly don't feel like it's too much. Again, we're seeing a star player on this slate with high expected ownership and higher chance of being in the optimal lineup than that expected ownership. Kyler Murray, like Devontae Adams and Jonathan Taylor, another positive leverage play here. I still think that I see the chat talking about all these possibilities, positive possibilities I'm talking about for Indy. They're saying, well, the Cardinals are going to smash them today. Indy is average at best. I believe that too. I think that is the most likely scenario here, that the Cardinals come out throwing. They're fourth in the NFL in game script adjusted pace of play, and they're top 10 in the NFL in game script adjusted pass rate. So they are pass heavy and play fast, and I think you will see them get on their feet a little bit more. Christian Kirk looks like he's going to be that wide receiver one, but it's really Kyler's passing ability and his rushing ability, and then it's really everyone else on the Cardinals for me.
Yeah, this is one where I think we're getting our broader base for a stack, right? If we're going to this team, there are options galore that you can look to. So you mentioned Kirk off the top as kind of the nominal wide receiver one with no Hopkins. We've got Kirk, we've got AJ Green out there, we've got Rondale Moore out there, even Antoine Wesley. So out of those guys, is Kirk your kind of go-to guy? And then how much of like an AJ Green, how much of a Rondale Moore are you getting to?
Actually, no, Kirk is not. Now, I think he's a fine play. At 5,600 on DraftKings, he is the second highest salary wide receiver, but I actually think fading the target share from last week is the way to go. I think we should wipe the slate clean in terms of how this distribution of opportunity is going to sort itself out in Arizona, because that game script was all out of whack compared to how Arizona is typically playing. Now, they could find themselves playing from behind in any game in the future, obviously, but I don't put a whole lot of weight into the order things went down because of how far down they were in that game. Yes, Christian Kirk gets the most targets here, 12 targets, but I'm going to have plenty of AJ Green. I'm going to have plenty of Zach Ertz, and I'm definitely going to be taking chances on Antoine Wesley and Rondale Moore. Wesley's the one that really intrigues me. 8 targets last week. He's at 3K. I don't know if we're going to see 8 targets again. He pretty much caught a touchdown last week. In my opinion, he caught a touchdown, but I forget. I think they may have called it back. But I saw a player that is still very low in salary, getting way under utilized in lineups right now, and 8 targets is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic volume for a guy coming in at 3,000 on the DK slate. I mean, that's kind of a no-brainer. If he gets anywhere approaching that volume, it's going to be pretty easy for him to come down with 2-3 of those passes and blow through that salary requirement, and only owned 11% of the time. 4,900 on FanDuel and 10.2% of the time. Definitely a nice little tournament play there. Is AJ Green your preference out of the next 3 guys? Like, is it? I guess since you're saying no to Kirk, then it's just basically kind of an even distribution, or do you have a favorite among the 4 receivers?
I'm probably playing the ownership game a little bit. Like, why is AJ Green twice the expected ownership of players like Rondale Moore and Antoine Wesley? Is he twice as likely to hit? Now, I do think that taking the slightly lower salary at 5,100 compared to a player like Christian Kirk, AJ Green is fine. If he fits as my final option, or sort of that like middle piece that makes things work, that's fine, but I'm not going to prioritize him. In fact, right now in my latest run, I'm pretty far under the field on AJ Green.
Okay. All right. So that's a solid breakdown there. And then you mentioned Zach Ertz as part of that. And I think we should go back, circle back around to him. Coming up in a lot of lineups, pushing 50% on both sites right now in the latest projection that I have. Is he the top tight end on the board today?
I think it's pretty obvious that he is, because all the other teams here, we've been mentioning multiple players.
Yep.
And for the Cardinals, it's clear, it's obvious who their number 1 tight end option is. We talked about 2 Indianapolis Colts. We talked about 2 Green Bay Packers tight ends, and we talked about 3 Cleveland Browns tight ends here. So why not just trust in the safety of that big midseason acquisition for the Arizona Cardinals? We saw him get 11 targets last week. Again, we're not weighting that too much, but we do think that double-digit targets is in Zach Ertz's range of outcomes in every game for the rest of the season. The way they use the tight end in this offense as well is very conducive to Zach Ertz racking up targets like he used to in Philadelphia, because they play fast, because they pass so often. They rely on chunk short yardage plays to get those easier second and third downs. That's perfect for Ertz's game at this point, and he's actually proven to get some deep passes too. He had over 100 air yards last week as well.
Oof, love it. And a guy that we've grown to trust him over the years. I think he's a guy that I've always been comfortable throwing in there. The price is right. And in this game, second most frequently optimal player in this game at 51% on the DK slate. So he's actually squeezing out a little bit of positive leverage, believe it or not, despite coming in nearly half of all lineups. So that's pretty fantastic. Definitely the clear-cut tight end one for me. And that's another situation where I'm just kind of willing to eat the ownership on the good chalk and get different elsewhere. I think he's that strong. You mentioned a little bit of love for the Colts D. Anything on the Arizona side? Are you going to their defense at all?
I'm less excited about them. Honestly, they've slid over the last few weeks in some of the metrics I look at. In schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed, they were flirting with the top 10 for much of the year. Now they're below league average, and here's what's really scaring me, is that they're leaning towards being a run funnel, meaning it's easier to run on them than pass on them. That does not bode well when you're playing Jonathan Taylor and the Colts.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's a good catch there. Anything else to call out for this game? We've got just a couple of minutes left. This flew by. I can jump into a couple questions here and see if there's any questions, but anything else to call out here?
I think that's kind of it for this game. And from a macro perspective on the slate, I do want to say, guys, we kind of mentioned it a couple times. All of these stud players, the ones that even your grandpa who doesn't watch football, who's watching with you today, knows their names. They are actually really, really solid. Our tools pointing us towards a stars and scrubs approach with this slate here. Fit as many of those top guys in, and then use your football knowledge to find those off the wall plays to make it work salary wise.
That's a great way to look at it. I love it. Somebody in the chat asked a showdown focused question on the Green Bay side of things. They were asking if you're building one lineup in showdown, are you going to Aaron Rodgers or are you going to Davante Adams in the captain spot? I have an opinion on that based on a lot of the showdown articles that I write. We do looking back over the last 2+ years of what works out most frequently in DraftKings showdown builds. And that's typically putting the quarterback in the flex spot because of that quarterback salary multiplier. Now, is Davante going to be significantly more optimal because of that? He's at a very high price as well. It's about the impact that it has on the rest of your lineup and what you can get in there. But I think for me, the preference would be pass catcher. So I would put Davante in there, and then I would get Rodgers into the flex. Do you see that the other way around, or do you agree with that?
I think that is a perfect breakdown of that. Also, usually you see quarterbacks over-owned in the captain spot, and you have a higher chance of duplication. I know Davante Adams is going to be chalky at that spot, but you can find other ways to differentiate.
Yep, absolutely. That's one where you definitely want to make sure focus on getting different with like 2 of those other picks that you're making, and I think that'll get you there, and that's the right way to look at. Yes, Mr. McPherson, there is a live before lock tonight before the Indiana-Arizona game, and I will see you there, my friend. That'll be you and I coming back for that one. That's a dynamite little plug for our upcoming show. But before that, we've got NFL live before lock coming up right after this, right now on this channel. So stick around. It's going to be Eric and Matts Gajewski taking you through right up to lock for this slate. We appreciate everybody hanging out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We are out of here.
Play Millsap.
You should not play Millsap. Yeah.
Who do I play instead of Millsap?
I will figure that out with you after this. But I mean, Dorian Finney-Smith doubtful. It's just going to be Dallas on slot with the value. Sterling
More
Brown
importantly,
season.
I don't know who I'm playing on FanDuel Cash.
Oh, we'll figure that out too. We'll chat.
All right.
I'll have to swap after. Yeah, I'm ready. What's going on, everybody? Welcome, part 2. Me again. Merry Christmas, the sequel. Looking forward to talking a little NFL. This is NFL Live Before Lock, right? Yeah, that's what it is. Looking forward to chatting a little football here for a Saturday, for a Christmas slate. 2-gamer, really going to be enjoyable. And I've got just the guy that's going to help us do that. That's Matts Gajewski, at Matt_Gajewski on Twitter. How you doing, my friend? How's your Christmas?
It's going good with some family, so not in my usual location, as you guys can see, but the Packers are playing. I am in Wisconsin, and everybody here is really excited for it, and so am I. How are you, though? Merry Christmas to you, Eric.
Skull. Tell everybody around. Let the people know that. I don't know. I mean, what am I going to expect? You're living in Wisconsin. Everybody's going to cheer for Green Bay. This is why we butt heads from time to time. I think
I'm actually a Bears fan.
I know you are, which is kind of the more disturbing thing about you.
Yeah, I mean, that's not good. So you and I are both kind of struggling through this, but the family they're actually having a Christmas meal right now in preparation for the Packer game. So I am missing it, skipping it for this stream, and crossing my fingers that nobody barges in the last 5 minutes. If they do, you guys might get a glimpse of some chaos, but hopefully we avoid that.
Yeah, taser time. That's what I see in the chat. Taser.
Oh, so most people in the chat probably don't know about that, which is good.
Well,
I will
tell the people. I will tell the people about it if they hit the like button. If you guys hit the like button, I promise you a Christmas story with it doesn't have a happy ending for you. It's not going to be enjoyable at some point in time, but How I Met Your Mother slap bet. That's what it makes me think of every single time. We'll get to that. We got Joe K as we get in. Happy birthday, Eric. Oh, thank you so much. You know, the Christmas baby over here. It's not my birthday at all. That would be way too cool. But $2, I'm happy to make it my birthday for $2. But either way, we've got an NFL slate to get to discussing here. You ready to get digging into it, my dude?
Yeah, man, I'm having a lot of fun and I'm ready.
I can't tell. Everything you say sounds sarcastic.
No, dude, I'm not being sarcastic. We have a really interesting slate. And I know we're going to get into all this, but a lot of the injuries we were waiting for, I like talking about the guys in the fringes. So having like D Hop out and Rondale questionable, and James Conner looks like he's going to play, but we don't know at what capacity. I think a lot of that's interesting for a 2-game slate. And I do think there's edges, even though some people may not agree.
I think that there's massive edges. I think both these games are pretty decent too. I mean, we're looking at a 7, obviously Cleveland's a dog going into Green Bay here, Indianapolis going into Arizona, but 46.5, 48.5. It's not like these low 40, 41 totals we've been seeing in a lot of these spots. So I'm with you. Also, why is half of your face, you're literally like Two-Face right now from Batman.
I don't know how that started.
This is incredible. The green screen isn't working for Zoom and we're stuck with Two-Face over here.
I'll fix it. The green screen is supposed to be off.
Batman has to pick between you and his girl. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Glory be and the saints be praised. It's a Christmas miracle. Let's dig into the quarterback position, everybody. Hit that like button once again as we get going.
We're just
Harvey
troubleshooting a little bit.
Harvey Dent over there. Kyler Murray, Aaron Rodgers, Carson Wentz, Baker Mayfield. Those are the 4 quarterbacks. Let me tell you, one of those is not like the others. His name's Baker Mayfield. The other 3, I do have quite a bit of interest in here. Specifically, Kyler, obviously with his rushing upside. Green Bay here. Also, Aaron Rodgers on the top end. Let's start it this way. Aaron Rodgers or Kyler Murray, pick one.
For tournaments, it's going to be Rodgers for me. I'm always going to reference tools like our top stacks. And one thing with Kyler is he actually hasn't been playing very well recently, and he's down as number 1 receiver. Rodgers, he's in a pretty decent spot against Cleveland here. You already referenced the spreads, but Green Bay is over a touchdown favorite against Cleveland. Arizona, with the kind of skid they've been on, they're just 2.5-point favorites, and Indianapolis is a team that's been surging. So anything you look at like implied team total wise, you're going to have Aaron Rodgers up and above. Our top stacks tool does have Kyler as a slightly negative leverage play, but it's a 2-game slate. So I like to think about this in terms of ceiling with these quarterbacks. So even though Kyler is really owned, I think there's ways you can build around him to be contrarian with your lineup and eat some of that ownership. So on a 2-game slate, I like to look at the top stacks tool, but I'm not going to treat it as gospel. I think you can still play some of these high-owned quarterbacks like Kyler and get different elsewhere. But those are very clearly the 2, and those are the 2 I'm prioritizing.
Yeah, I am too. I think that, again, this is not a slate where I think salary matters all that much. We have Jonathan Taylor. I think it's pretty easy. For whatever reason, he's 8,300 over on DK, down from 9K. He's easier to fit into lineups. It makes no sense that they did such a thing, even for a 2-game slate, especially I would say for a 2-game slate where, you want to make him a little bit more cost prohibitive, but him and Devontae Adams are your prize jewels at the skill positions. We shouldn't have too difficult of a time playing Aaron Rodgers and Kyler Murray. I almost said Aaron Murray. That made no sense, but we should have no problem playing those 2 together. There's a reason though. I mean, they're 70% of the ownership. Everybody else is doing the same thing. So we have 2 other options, Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield. Pick one between those 2 on the bottom end.
It's going to be Carson Wentz. And
hot take. That was a joke.
I was going to say, how hot is it really?
It's 0%. It is the opposite of a hot take. It is a cold take.
Yeah, so Indianapolis is playing really well. Obviously, their offense just functions a little bit different than in Arizona or a Green Bay. Their number 1 skill position player is Jonathan Taylor, and when they can kind of play to their preferred game plan, everything flows through Jonathan Taylor. With that said, you still have a pretty decent implied team total for Indianapolis, and that's a spot I think you can capitalize on. Even if Jonathan Taylor has a productive game, especially on like FanDuel, at his price, if Jonathan Taylor has like 100 yards and 1 score, but then Pittman catches 2 touchdowns or the offense just doesn't go completely through Taylor, you could see Carson Wentz at his price being a quarterback that makes sense because he's a bit cheaper than Rodgers and Kyler. He just brings you to a different construction. So I do like that. And I think Baker's pretty clearly the lowest guy on this totem pole.
We got people out here concerned about Quentin Nelson, Glowinski, both on the reserve COVID list here for the Colts. Any concerns about their offensive line being able to protect Carson Wentz today?
Yeah, but it's a 2-game slate.
That is exactly my point. I was going to say you can split hairs between it, but he's going to be on the field. He's the starting quarterback. I think I have interest simply because of the 2 guys on the bottom end. Again, we're looking at raw points. It's not like we're going to worry about the $100 discrepancy at quarterback. So for me, it's a pick 'em in the Rodgers tier and Murray tier, and then a pick 'em between Wentz and Mayfield. And so that's kind of why I prompted it as such. Carson Wentz, I will just have way more of than Baker Mayfield. You're doing the same, right?
Yes, 100%.
All right, me too.
Not 100%,
25%.
Not 100% exposure. I am in 100% agreement with you.
I know. I just thought it was fun because, chat likes to be exacting about that. I don't really know how to go about splitting hairs between any of these other quarterbacks. Anything else you want to add, considering we know Rodgers and Murray, very good at fantasy points. Carson Wentz, Baker Mayfield, not so good at fantasy points.
I think with Rodgers in particular, and this might be a reason why the top stack tool likes him. He's just so condensed with his target share. And I mean that everybody that plays Rodgers for the most part is going to have Adams, but I think you can add some interesting pieces to this stack, like Lazard or even DeGuara on a really cheap end, filling that tight end spot. There's still ways to get a little contrarian with Rodgers. And even everything our tools are saying, his percentage chance of being the highest scorer at the quarterback position and his ownership makes him a very good play. We have a 12% leverage. And again, it's a 2-game slate. So take this for what it's worth. But compared to Kyler, it appears he is going to come in a little under owned based on our tools.
Agreed. I like the Kyler Murray side. So you said you liked Aaron Rodgers though more, I thought, right?
Yes. But the difference is, I mean, with Kyler, you're not paying a premium. You're paying
Correct.
for Kyler himself, but then Kirk is affordable across platforms. Green is that middling tier. You can go all the way to Antoine Wesley to completely punt the stack or play Ertz. The Kyler stack is a little bit cheaper, but I'm running multiple lineups today. You are too. Those are the two quarterbacks I'm going to have the most of. Yep. If you're playing like a cash game style and you're just looking for one quarterback, I think Kyler is safer than Rodgers because of his rushing. But for tournaments, I like Rodgers because of the ownership leverage he's appearing to give you.
I agree. And again, that's just simply referring to the tools. And we have tools that you can refer to for today. If you're playing NBA, we have the player projections and week 16 NFL ownership projections free as well. Those aren't going to apply here to Saturday's slate, but I wanted to at least let you know about them because this is Christmas. And on Christmas, I gave you my heart. The very next day, you tore it away. This year, to save me from tears, I'll give them to someone special. That's my reading for the day. Let's continue on. Ready to talk running backs.
Let's do it, man. This is
you just got completely thrown off by that. You've never heard that song in your life, have you?
No, I have heard it. I don't know what it is though.
Okay.
But running back is really interesting because of pricing across the two sites are very different today.
Yeah. So let's start with this one then. Jonathan Taylor, why did his price go down 700?
But that's a DraftKings thing. On FanDuel, he's 10-5.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm playing more on FanDuel. But I just wanted to ask because that's.
Oh, it's egregious.
It's egregious.
It's egregious,
especially on a 2-game slate where you want to make it cost prohibitive. You want to make people pay for nice things. Also, Jordan Klein, hello in the chat. You love my sweater. I love that. Nothing better than "Do you like my sweater?" That's 2 lyrics. Count them. Let's keep it going. I'm looking at the running back board, and it's Jonathan Taylor, and you prioritize him on DraftKings. It's a joke. I'm playing almost 100% because I don't really feel like I'm him failing just feels like not possible in terms of an optimal for me over on DK. But on FanDuel, let's talk more specifically for that because I do think referring to the boom bust tool gives us a pretty good idea of what we need to be doing. But how do you view Taylor, where he is just insane up there on the top end as the most expensive player period on this slate?
Honestly, I'm having a lot of difficulty with him on FanDuel. I think for tournaments, and this is a cash game thing where I'm really struggling with him. I'm going to be playing him in tournaments. It's a 2-game slate. You have to play at least some, but he leads you to a very, I think, specific construction. And if you're trying to be contrarian in that, I don't like the lineups as much. The lineups that have him have a lot of punts, players like Antoine Wesley, players like DeGuara and Jack Doyle. And it's not so much that Taylor's in your lineup, but it's what he does to the rest of it on FanDuel specifically that has me a little weary. And then factoring in ownership, this guy's going to be extremely owned too. So there might be a little bit of an edge there just based on price, but I'm still going to have lineups with him.
What do you feel like you're sacrificing when you play Jonathan Taylor and Devontae Adams, and then, you punt at other positions? What do you feel like what is preventing you from wanting to get to him in cash?
So you're going to get similar workloads from other players. Mm-hmm. If you play Nick Chubb at a cheaper price, the workload is not the same. Don't get me wrong. These guys do not have a 1-for-1 workload. Nick Chubb is on a significant underdog in this game, and we know that Dearness Johnson is going to take away some of the pass catching work. But what would you say Nick Chubb's workload is as a percentage compared to Taylor? I would say Nick Chubb has maybe 90% of the work that Taylor does.
Yeah.
What would you say?
I don't think it's that hard to play both, is what I'm getting at. Like, I think you punt literally everything in cash and you get Taylor, Chubb, and Adams. I feel like that's my approach, mainly because the certainty you get from Adams at a wide receiver position as opposed to anybody else. You don't need to play Kirk. Rondale Moore, whether he's in or not, I mean, obviously you get more value in the event that he's out. Even though at 5,100, he is a source of value in and of itself. There's no real tight end option. Like, obviously Zach Ertz is by a mile the best projected guy, but he's 5,800. It's not that hard to get there. Defense is garbage. I think you're able to just punt all the way down to Cleveland. I guess for me, it's just talking through like people who are playing cash, like you and me here, having opportunities to do it. But like, legitimately, defense is so irrelevant to me on this slate. Obviously, the Packers are going to be the highest raw one. Colts, I think, are projected a little bit more so than Arizona, even at 3,900. But like, if you go down to 3,300 with the Browns, I think you should be able to play Taylor, Chubb, and Adams with pretty ease, wouldn't you say? Or no?
I ran optimals for Awesemo, and then I ran an aggregate across the industry. He wasn't in either.
Okay.
I ran our top 20 for Awesemo. He is in 1 of 20. And then the aggregate I ran across the industry also had him in 1 of 20. So he did not. If you do think that is the approach in cash, I think Taylor's still going to come with some ownership, but I found it interesting that just the raw projections did not jam him in on FanDuel.
All right. He's still positively leveraged on FanDuel right now, 51.3% ownership, 55% optimal chance. For me, the main thing is like when you're looking at FanDuel and you see the boom percentage being around 13.4%, it's a very, very low number. It's actually the lowest at the entire position by anybody like remotely in play. But here's the major thing is you're getting so many raw points. He's getting that 90% workload. I think for me, I would just find a way to play the two guys with 90% plus workload. And, you know, optimal. I love running the optimal. I love being able to take a look at things and be able to tweak a player here, a player there, because in the long run, that's going to be beneficial. But in this instance, I think you just make sure if you need the money to get there, go to Cleveland defense where, you know, Cleveland can randomly do anything. Any defense can randomly do anything and just save the money that you would go from the Colts down to the Browns, save the 600 there. Again, I know what your build looks like. I have an idea of exactly what you're doing, but, you know, for me, I would just strongly advise you to try to go to Jonathan Taylor.
I try to run optimals with all three of those guys locked, and it keeps giving me Baker and Wentz quarterbacks. So I'm guessing you're
that's not fun. I'm got Kyler, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Devontae Adams, punt, Zach Ertz, punt. So there you go. I don't think it's that hard. And again, tight end, I'm going between two builds where I'm just going way down, and we'll get to that. Mr. DeGuara, let's go. But let's get
the whole conversation with that was just the cost prohibitiveness of Taylor. And right. I do think in tournaments you can make lineups with and without him. But to your cash lineup, I think a lot of tournament lineups are going to look like that.
Right. They probably should, because Jonathan Taylor, if you had to pick one guy at the running back position period that it's like, I'm scared if I don't have him, it's Jonathan Taylor 100 times out of 100. And, you know, if you were to not have him, you obviously know that the opportunity is there. And if, of course, you get on the other side of it and you're able to, you know, have him put up 14 or something, but even on this slate, on a 2-game slate, 14 could find a way to be optimal. So, I mean, for me in tournaments, it's full bore ahead with Jonathan Taylor. And I understand looking at it too, you know, like you go over to DraftKings, you go to the boom bust tool, the exact same thing that we were just talking about with FanDuel that exists for him there, doesn't necessarily exist on the DraftKings.com, where I know a lot of you guys are playing here. Currently, what is it? 66% optimal. Yeah, no, he's positively leveraged there too. Just refreshing that 10%. I'm just going to be jamming Jonathan Taylor if he's going to be positive leverage. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be completely true. I think it's easier to play him on DK, and people are just going to do that. But on FanDuel, I'm going to still do that. Let's talk the rest of the position here again, because Jonathan Taylor, nobody's going to argue that he's good play. And obviously, if you fade, you know what you're doing. You're doing it hoping that he doesn't completely blow up the slate like he has the potential to. But we have Nick Chubb. Based on your rhetoric there on the front end, you absolutely love getting to him today.
On FanDuel specifically, on DraftKings, not as much, but it's a price thing. He's $3K cheaper than Jonathan Taylor on FanDuel. So your lineups look much, much different if you play Nick Chubb there. And I think that's a big deal, especially with the ownership that Jonathan Taylor should bring. And again, this isn't necessarily a bet against Taylor or thinking Taylor is going to fail. But if Taylor doesn't put up like a 30, 40 point score in tournaments at this price, there's a chance that one of these backs could outscore him from a price adjusted perspective. And again, it's not that Nick Chubb is going to outscore Jonathan Taylor just flat out on the day. It's that at 7.6K versus 10.5K, could Nick Chubb score enough that he's more impactful in your lineup? On DraftKings, this is not as much of a conversation because Taylor is so mispriced. On DraftKings, he's just a priority.
Yep. Agreed. That was one of those, like, you just abruptly stopped talking in the middle of a sentence, and I thought you were going to continue on, but I caught it. I could have just kept going through seamlessly.
This is like the first time I can remember with such a stark pricing difference between the best player on the slate.
Yep. It's fun for FanDuel purposes. Again, I'm going to be playing a little bit more over there as a result of it. So yay. Thank you to them for making a very interesting slate. I'm still going to be jamming him. So I guess there's that. Rest of the position. We have this Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon split, which has not been a whole lot of fun if you own them in year-long stuff. I can tell you that much. I love Aaron Jones, but it's not very enjoyable seeing AJ Dillon getting the workload that he's been getting. How are you kind of looking at these two backs? How are you incorporating them into lineups today?
Yeah, I'm trying to play a lot of these guys because they are favorites. And I think the timeshare is good for tournaments, specifically because people might shy away from them and go to the more locked in players like Nick Chubb and Jonathan Taylor. But there's still a chance that one of these guys scores multiple touchdowns. They're used in different ways. Obviously, we know the role for AJ Dillon is going to be more your big bruising back used at the end of the games, potentially used around the goal line. But that's not even necessarily true. We've seen Aaron Jones play a lot in the red zone, catch a lot of those little shuffle passes that Rodgers likes to throw in that area of the field. It's basically been a 50-50 timeshare. And if that's going to cause people to shy away from the Green Bay Packers as 7.5-point favorites over Cleveland, I like these guys quite a bit.
All right. Big year-long news again. If you're in your fantasy playoffs, you just got Mike Williams on the COVID list too. So joy, go pick up any of those other guys that are probably not on the wire anymore. Dude, it's just bonkers. Again, it's like every 5 seconds I'm on high alert for trying to pick stuff up. If you're in semifinals this week, I mean, it's just, I've got one league where it's like, I might have Travis Kelce. I might have DeGuara. Those are my two options.
And that's like because
and I'm like, I can't do anything about it tomorrow. And the guy I'm playing against smartly picked up Kansas City's tight end. So whatever. I hate everyone. This is not enjoyable whatsoever, but let's keep it moving here. Rest of the running back position. I don't really have anything to add. You kind of like split the difference. The ownership is pretty close. AJ Dillon, obviously he's just seeing volume in times. 2015 carries 2 of his last 3. Last time out, got bailed out by the touchdown in his 7 attempts there. But again, a different situation against Baltimore. Aaron Jones there, 13 carries, saw more of the lion's share, but could just as easily go back and forth. So I'm going to have shares of both here. Same kind of situation, a little bit, maybe a little condensed here. James Conner entering this game questionable, but he's expected to play. Chase Edmonds, he's going to be somebody that, is going to be a headache once again here. I thought he was going to blow that game open last week against Detroit. Well, nothing happened against Detroit. They completely sucked. But in this bounce back spot, James Conner and Chase Edmonds, how are you involving them in your lineups?
I love Chase Edmonds, and this is probably a leak for me. I play this guy a lot because he's on a team with an explosive offense. At least in the beginning of the season, they were more explosive than they have been recently. But Edmonds has that explosive skill set as well. The problem is James Conner scores every single touchdown, and now James Conner's actually shown some chops as a receiver, so he's taking some of that work away. Edmonds leads the NFL in yards per carry. Like, he's been amazing when he's on the field. He just has and I don't want to slight James Conner because he's played really well himself. But for today's slate specifically, and on DraftKings, where Chase Edmonds, his pass catching role matters a little bit more, Chase Edmonds is very, very cheap. And it's a spot where ownership is also lining up with that. And I think you could potentially gain an edge here because of this. So I think at the price, if you're trying to jam in multiple studs, Edmonds is an avenue to do so. So again, it's kind of contrary to the Jonathan Taylor talk we had earlier. If you play Edmonds in your lineup, you're going to be able to jam multiple studs at other positions. The quarterback, you're probably going to get Taylor himself. Maybe you get a better tight end because you're rostering him. And I'm not sure you're giving up a whole lot compared to a guy like AJ Dillon, who's 1,000 more expensive, or an Aaron Jones who's up at 7K. Like if I asked you, what is the difference in the role between Aaron Jones and Chase Edmonds right now? How would you break that down?
I would break it down as one as a heel issue and one does not, which is nice. And it's weird to think that Chase Edmonds is the healthier between the two, but I think that that's kind of what we're looking at. Chase Edmonds, I think, is a really fun pairing here for Kyler Murray as well. Obviously, this is a close spread. I don't really want to get into like what type of game flow we're looking at here, but one of my favorite lineups that I'm looking at on FanDuel that I built that I'm going to enter in everything is a Murray, Wesley, Edmonds combination. And I think that it encapsulates a lot of upside over on that site. Again, you're kind of targeting touchdowns at the running back position. And I think, obviously Wesley, that's going to be dependent. That's more of an assumption that Rondale Moore's out. And not that I think Wesley could be effective either way. He's out there 8 targets. He's going to be out there in 3 wide receiver sets. So on the left side of the field for Arizona. So I like getting to him. Chase Edmonds, somebody that I think is just healthier. So James Conner, if he were healthier, I'd probably have more concerns, but I am with you. I think I like the Edmonds side a lot more. Don't look at the box score for James Conner. It's irrelevant for the last however many weeks because Chase Edmonds simply wasn't there.
Yeah, I'm going to get my hand in the dirt a little bit more with this Rondale take. Rondale is not used in anywhere remotely the same way as Antoine Wesley. And I think you can even see that in their build. Wesley's like a bigger, leaner receiver. He's definitely not DeAndre Hopkins, but he's built in that way. Mm-hmm. He's used on the perimeter. They do not use Rondale Moore in that capacity at all. So the Rondale Moore injury is impactful because Rondale's going to play his role, but I don't really see Wesley affecting him at all. Like Wesley played 85% of the snaps last week, 8 targets, mostly inefficient on them. Like he had 19 receiving yards. But he's still a guy who's on the field nearly every snap. And I personally don't see that changing very much based on how Cliff Kingsbury's deployed him. Do you see that any differently?
No, I'm obsessed with him today. He's my favorite tournament play.
Okay,
so
I love Wesley.
We're on the same. Again, we'll get to him.
The only risk is he's just bad.
What was that?
The only risk is he's just not good at football.
But that's mitigated because he has Kyler Murray, who's been more of a pocket passer this entire season as a whole. I think that he's not that bad. I mean, he's freaking, playing a lot of snaps here. And, I think that they have other options. I mean, obviously Moore's just kind of been limited because his skill set, I think, is limited. He's super, super fast, can be super, super explosive, but he runs routes about as well as you or me. So that's problematic, right? Like if you want to run routes so you can catch the ball, rather than catch it at the line of scrimmage and then just run, right? Like that seems important.
Eric, I love you, buddy, but you're giving me way too much credit on my route running ability.
Okay, well, I'm giving credit to my route running ability then is what it is. Just like I'm going to give credit to our sponsor, Prize Picks, because Prize Picks, we're at the half-hour portion of the program, and Prize Picks is where you want to be going to get that first $100 first match deposit bonus. It's really fun today, especially because LeBron James, over under 0.5 points here for Christmas Day. It's a free square. It's a free square. You just simply take the over, you move on with your life. It's great. You don't have the Sharks optimizers, any of that ridiculousness that you might have to deal with on these sites that we keep complicatedly talking about. We have 2, 3, 4, or 5 player props that you're going to combine and put together in a card or a play or whatever you want to call it. You're going to have that lineup. There's another word for it. There you go. Put them together and you can win up to 10x your entry fee. If you play a 5-player lineup, you can get 2x if you get 4 of 5 right. You get almost half your money back, 0.4x if you get 3 of 5 right. So unlike a traditional sports book, you're getting some money back in your pocket for those 5-player parlays. So a little bit more incentive to try to shoot for the moon though with some of those. So also we have a completely free player props tool. That doesn't get a whole lot better than that. Plus Odd Shopper, head to oddshopper.com, put some plays together here for Prize Picks. It doesn't get much easier than that. And as if that wasn't enough for you guys, 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum when you sign up and make a deposit at Prize Picks, 24 to 48 hours, you'll end up getting that redeemed for a free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. So stop guessing, start winning, join us here. But more importantly, join Prize Picks, the sponsor here today. Thank you so much to them. We love their site. It's super clean, super efficient. Is there a pick today, Mr. Matts Gajewski? I know that I just kind of went on a tangent there, but I wanted to get this in so we can get back to building lineups with the people. Do you have a prize pick that you are in love with today?
I think there's a couple you can look to. First of all, did you just see the Pascal news? Do you think that affects any of these numbers?
Let me take a look. Do we have news guy in chat?
So the Colts just had some guys get ruled out via COVID, but one thing like you can do on Prize Picks is take advantage of these early in the week or when you get news. I think both are really impactful ways to take advantage of some of these things. But overall, I'll go back to my play before we talk about that.
Oh, hang on. Darius Leonard out too. Kari Willis. So
yeah, those are 3 starters.
Those are really, I mean, Darius Leonard, let's be serious. He's pretty freaking good. So
Kari Willis is a starting safety.
Yep. Zach Pascal starting wide receiver. So joy to the world. News has come. Let us redeem its. I don't have anything for it. Keep going.
Before we get into that, not to slight our Prize Pick sponsor. I love playing on Prize Picks. I like the overs on AJ Dillon's rushing yards today, 42.5.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a limited number here because of the timeshare with Aaron Jones. That makes sense to me, but you still have a team that's a 7.5 point favorite. That projected game script should lend itself a lot to AJ Dillon rush attempts. And maybe in the second half, they can ride him to a victory if it plays to that spread. So that's my favorite one. But what about you?
So, I mean, I don't know. Pascal news, maybe. I mean, who ends up being the main beneficiary here for him?
Probably TY.
When Ashton Doolin, they could probably use him more.
They might
I hate
use
him.
More
He's like a deep bomb threat, right? He's just kind of running straight lines.
Yeah,
I think I saw that on his route tree.
I looked at Prize Picks for some of that news. They don't have a lot of Colts receiving props up there. Like you can basically just get Pittman, Hilton.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't get Doolin on there, but I think T.Y. Hilton 19.5 is probably the one that's affected the most.
Yeah, I would say he's going to be on the field more, and it's not, that number isn't going to change here in the next however many minutes. So looking at, even 12.5 receiving yards for Jonathan Taylor, just maybe kind of a game script spot. 19.5 though. You're right. That is the one. Zach Pascal being on the list there, 18.5. Do not play that one, and do not take the under because it will not play. It's no play in the event that you play somebody that is inactive. So there you are. T.Y. Hilton over 19.5 receiving yards. We did that live here on Prize Picks. I love that play. Fire it up and combine it with over 199.5 passing yards from Carson Wentz. I stole that one from my buddy Greg Ehrenberg, who fired that up on the NBA Prize Picks portion of the program here earlier in the day. So again, Christmas Day, we're talking Prize Picks. It's really, really fun. If you're sitting around trying to find something to do, if you're around your family opening gifts and things aren't going very well, head to Prize Picks. I think things will go better for you. All right, let's get back here to some of the news. I think we covered the running back position. We're done there, right?
I think so. I want to mention Dearness Johnson because he has caught some passes, and I think if they're in severe negative game script, that would be his role over Chubb. But a really low probability option. I think he's your Millie Maker type flyer. But ultimately, I'm probably not going to try to play a lot of Dearness or Nyheim Hines or some of those players.
Neither am I. Let's go to the wide receiver position where obviously things just got more interesting. You rule out a guy who, was the wide receiver 2 for a team that is on a 2-game slate, and it matters a lot. So we'll get to that. I'm going to update a couple of things on my end and have a better idea of what we're looking at here. But the conversation starts and ends with Davante Adams. Like legitimately, how much Davante Adams is too much Davante Adams, and why is it 100%?
Dude, I'm in agreement with you. I think on both platforms for Davante Adams, he's a must play. The only way you're fading him, I think, is you're playing the Millie Maker style tournament, something with over $100,000 or 100,000 entries, and you're probably playing like Lazard or something for leverage in that case. But otherwise, any sort of small field, I think Davante Adams is the first player in your lineup. He has a target share and usage on this slate that's just different from every other player at the receiver position.
So I just did something really fun, which is I just locked Adams and Taylor into DraftKings because, again, we're looking at potential positive leverage on the current projected ownership for Davante Adams. That's just people being too cute. 64.1% ownership, 74.5% optimal appearance rate. I repeat, 3/4 of the time you play out this slate, Davante Adams is optimal. That's way too high for me to want to try to get cute. I will get different elsewhere. I'll play Taylor. I'll play Adams. I'll take their raw points and I'll just get different elsewhere. That seems like a lot of fun for me. So I'm kind of like talking myself into firing even a little bit more there. But let's kind of keep moving down the board here. Obviously, we're waiting for Rondale Moore news, but I think Christian Kirk is pretty unaffected. I think he's pretty safe to be out there just about the entire time. 12 targets, 9 receptions, 94 and a touch. That makes people feel pretty darn good. But 5,400, kind of landing at that price point where, being the second most expensive wide receiver is different on this slate than it is most other slates. How are you feeling about him currently at 35.8% ownership on DK?
I don't feel great about it because I don't think that target share is as condensed. So the ownership's not egregious for a 2-game slate. I think people hear the number 35% and they just have this negative reaction to it, which makes sense playing the main slate. But on 2-game slates, that's not something I'm too scared of. But overall, the one thing I am scared of is they distribute targets widely across the position. And it's not just AJ Green, Rondale if he's healthy, Wesley, but Ertz is very involved. You'll see both backs involved. So I don't think Christian Kirk has that same locked in projection as Davante Adams, and that's reflected in projections and ownership. But right now, I think if you can gain some positive leverage within Arizona, playing maybe AJ Green or Antoine Wesley, I don't think you're sacrificing as much as if you were to like forego Davante Adams in your lineup, if that makes sense.
All righty. We've got Nolan Kelly in the chat. We've got Jordan Klein in the chat. We've got everybody in the chat. Merry Christmas to all the guys working behind the scenes here at Awesemo that do just a great job. Of course, Mike Lawrence on his second show of the day here with me as well. Awesemo, good people. Really appreciate you hanging out with us, doing some work here on Christmas Day. Let's go, because now here comes the hot take portion of the program. If you were here to get some hot takes, here we go. Because here I said I'm going to be locking in Adams and I'm going to be locking in Taylor. Well, Eric, how could you possibly get different then? What are you doing to get different? Well, I'm playing a boatload of Antoine Wesley, like a irrational, egregious, scary amount of a dude, but it's simply he's on the field a lot. If Rondale Moore's out, he's going to be on the field even more, like just, by a slight bump. You listed off all the ways he's 3K. I'm shocked. And I mean, I am flat out shocked that he's 11.2% on DK. To say I'm over the field is an understatement when I have near 100% of somebody. But how do you feel about Antoine Wesley at 3K on this slate?
Yeah, you said everything you need to. He's on the field and he's involved. He's not your normal 3K receiver like Rashard Higgins for Cleveland. Like, he's out there, and the guy drew 8 targets last week. Again, he wasn't efficient with them, but even if he's remotely more efficient today, if he sees anything close to that target volume at 3K, he's going to be a phenomenal play. And you just mentioned his ownership. That makes it even better. Not to mention his price is so cheap. He's going to allow you to jam in Jonathan Taylor, Davante Adams, probably one of the expensive QBs. And maybe you can still get a Kirk or something else like that because he's so cheap. I love Wesley. He was one of the first guys I looked at for tournaments. I do think he's slightly thin for cash, but not out of the realm of question. And you built a really good lineup with him in cash. So I think he's even somewhat viable in that capacity.
Yeah, and if you're not going to play him, one of the reasons that I might shy away from doing that in cash, but I'm playing him in cash, so it doesn't matter. But if I were to shy away from him in cash, partially would be because you do have these mid-range guys, whether it's Kirk, Landry, or whomever else, picking up a ton of ownership. And I still don't anticipate Wesley getting a ton of ownership. And so you might want to just kind of like run with the field, hold their hand there in double ups and things of that nature. But even in head-to-heads, I have no problem firing up Wesley at the min. If you weren't the min and wasn't 4,900 on FanDuel, that'd be a different conversation. But when somebody's on the field that much in an offense that's now missing Hopkins, could miss more, impossible for me to get away from that. It just makes way too much sense. I'm hoping people don't land on him a bunch. I'm hoping more plays, just simply so that people don't get that pivot or try to figure out what to do with more shares. So that would be a bummer. Either way, Christian Kirk, Jarvis Landry, Michael Pittman, kind of the fascinating curiosity at the wide receiver position for me. Obviously, he's a little bit more owned than Christian Kirk, but he shouldn't be less expensive than Kirk. That makes no sense to me. I digress. Michael Pittman, number 1 wide receiver option here from the Colts, now losing Pascal. How do you feel about him on this slate at 40% on DK?
Yeah, I like him quite a bit. And again, 40%, little bit of sticker shock there, but 2-game slate. Should he be just 5% more owned than a guy like Kirk? I think Pittman plays the clear alpha role. It's just that his team functions through Jonathan Taylor, not him, compared to Green Bay, where they use Davante Adams and then the backs are a little bit secondary. So there are game scripts where Pittman plays a much larger role in the offense. And I actually kind of think the injury, I don't want to call them injuries, the absences that the Colts will sustain today could positively benefit him. Of course, you're removing the number 2 receiver on the team, but you're also removing 2 of like your best defenders. Darius Leonard probably is the best defender for that team. He's off the field. Kari Willis is an every down player for them at the safety. Those are 2 huge losses. And I haven't seen the spread change yet. It might be a little close to game time for it to swing too much, but I do think this probably gets to be a little bit closer. And even if by closer, I mean the Colts obviously losing value against the spread, making them potentially throw more. So I think all that could benefit Pittman.
All right, last real wide receiver situation to really break down, of course, with, Marquez Valdez-Scantling now on the COVID list. Alan Lazard vaults up the board here. So, I mean, we can try to go to some of those thin guys from Green Bay, but I'm going to try to do it at the tight end position. I want to talk Cleveland because this is just disgusting. Like Donovan Peoples-Jones getting 27%. I get it. I get it. He's at least shown it in the last however long, within recent weeks where he has some upside, but 27% of him, 4,200. I don't see really any difference. I would much rather go to my boy Wesley for way, way less. I'd rather go to a lot of places here, but Jarvis Landry, I think he's a piece of chalk I'm willing to eat just because of the guaranteed target share I feel like he has. But how do you feel about these ancillary options from Cleveland?
I don't feel great about them. And now that Landry's back, a player like DPJ is getting squeezed from multiple angles. Landry is going to be their target leader when everybody's healthy. I think that comes without question. And Peoples-Jones's role is this downfield deep threat. He stretches the field for this team. It's almost like a poor man's MVS. That's his role in the offense. And Baker has not been accurate whatsoever distributing him the ball in that role. And then you have a team in Cleveland who's going to rotate multiple receivers onto the field. You're going to see guys like Rashard Higgins and Demetric Felton plays running back, but sometimes he'll line up in the slot. And Anthony Schwartz is a gadget player who has a similar skill set to DPJ. And then you have the fact that they run multiple tight ends and they're getting basically all of them back healthy. Some of them coming off injury, some of them coming off COVID. So for the first time really in, I don't know how many weeks, Cleveland has a full stable of pass catchers. And I do not think that helps DPJ.
I'm with you. Again, I love that take. We're in lockstep a lot outside of Jonathan Taylor, which is a large disagreement.
We disagree.
Yeah, it's more of just I am willing to jam in raw points at the expense of everything else when those raw points are almost guaranteed.
The only difference is, okay, so you and I both love him on DK, cash, and GPPs. Yes. You and I are both playing him on FanDuel and GPPs. And you were playing him in cash for sure on FanDuel, and I'm running a 2v2, and I'm somewhat hesitant, and I just played devil's advocate against you. I still might play him in cash. I don't know.
You should. I will incur your losses for the day. Merry Christmas. No, if you lose with Jonathan Taylor in cash, anything you lose, I will recoup for you. And don't deposit $10,000 while we're talking now and fire it up. But I'm just letting you know you're not going to lose playing Jonathan Taylor in cash.
I think we have a bet going right now. What is our bet on? I forget.
I can't remember, but I won Chipotle from Lofty. I already know that from however long ago.
We made another bet, and I can't remember what it is. But if I end up playing the other lineup, we should just do another Chipotle bet. Head to head, my cash versus yours.
Okay. I like that. Lindy 4, send it, baby. Let's go. But again, on FanDuel, we'll just look at it and compare them after the fact. That's fine. Let's keep it going here though. We've got another situation, 15 minutes to go. Anything else from the wide receiver position? Because again, Lazard's fine. AJ Green's fine. We can talk about all these guys being fine. I just don't want to be playing Donovan Peoples-Jones at 27%. That's pretty established. Let's go back to wide receiver situation from Indianapolis quick. Kind of shore that up. Does T.Y. Hilton jump up the board for you in a way where you might be getting to him now?
Yeah, so the 2v2 with him in cash on FanDuel, he's part of it. And he's in the Jonathan Taylor side because I'm looking for punt receivers. And it's basically, him versus Wesley versus some of the other really cheap guys in that lineup. So I think he's in conversation there because of his price. But he's a much better play in tournaments, I think. Now, just anytime we get late news like this, I think the field is slow to react. And this news came very, very late. And I like you said before the show, we were talking about NBA. You like to play a lot on these days because a lot of casuals are playing and a lot of them aren't paying attention. They're with their families. So there's a chance people don't even realize that Pascal's out. And even if Pascal wasn't in their lineups, they just don't realize that the situation is different.
Oh, Eric Stinkquist. I'm so sad. Somebody's making fun of me on Christmas. Go F off. You're fine. Let's continue on to the tight end position. We go. Everybody hit that like button because it's Christmas and I don't stink. I think I'm pretty okay, actually, sometimes.
You're a good man, Eric.
Thanks. All right. So Zach Ertz at the top of the tight end board. It's fine. Don't mind me. I'm fine. No, Zach Ertz is just monstrously the best tight end play here. Period. I don't think anybody's going to be disagreeing with that here, but 4,800. He's going to be owned. How much Zach Ertz are you landing on this slate?
Good amount of Zach Ertz. And I will say, just for the differences in the sites, I prefer him on FanDuel, where you just have the pricing is not as it's tighter between the players. So Ertz at the top at 5,800 versus like a Jack Doyle at 5K. Like the price difference there isn't enough where I want to punt. I would rather just pay up for Ertz. On DraftKings, you actually have to make at least have the conversation, because he's a bit different from you could play DeGuara or Doyle for nearly 2K cheaper. With that said, I do not think players like Doyle and DeGuara have the same ceiling as Ertz. And I think he's a potential beneficiary from the DeAndre Hopkins. If Rondale Moore ends up being out, he's another guy that could benefit just from a raw target perspective. So I love Ertz. He's my highest on tight end. Just going to eat that chalk.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Fire it up. Yeah, I really don't know what else to add to that. There's Zach Ertz stands out from a projection basis, the most secure role, yada, yada, yada. You can take that for what it is. What gets fascinating is this next tier. Austin Hooper, David Njoku. That experiment obviously did not go well last time, sub 6 points. Maybe people feel burned from Njoku, and maybe now Hooper gets more attention coming off of 6 targets, 5 receptions. Seems like the field just kind of pretty neutral on them, both right around 20%, 17 and 19% respectively. But Josiah DeGuara getting 33%. And I'm still thinking that's a little bit on the low end. How do you feel about just Josiah DeGuara, obviously filling in here at tight end, but with the absence of MVS, more targets are up for grabs, 2,800, Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. How do you feel about him today? Because I'm unsure, but I'm over the field right now.
I am too, but not by much. I will say I changed a lot of this after the Pascal news. I'm trying to change more of it behind the scenes, but kind of break this down. Cleveland's going to play with 3 tight ends. They're all going to mix in on and off the field. We even saw Harrison Bryant vulture a touchdown in their last game. And Harrison Bryant's not really viable for DFS outside of like Millie Maker style tournaments, but he does impact Njoku and Hooper. And just having that third tight end makes me a little less interested in those players when you can get DeGuara at a cheaper price. Now, DeGuara is going to be splitting time with Mercedes Lewis. Last week, we had DeGuara 56% of the snaps, Mercedes Lewis 50. Targets were pretty similar. DeGuara had 5, Lewis had 3. They're both going to be involved. But then you have a guy for Indianapolis in Jack Doyle, who's been playing a ton, nearly 80% of the snaps and only 1 target. And we kind of know how this goes for Indianapolis. When they can play their game, they're just going to run Taylor. But when they're down in games, there's the chance for spike target weeks for any of these guys. We just removed Pascal from the offense, and that doesn't necessarily mean that Ashton Dulin or one of these other receivers is now going to be a 100% player. This team has the ability to use a lot of 12 personnel with Doyle, Cox, whoever it may be, Granson, and Doyle's already on the field a lot. But now if you tell me there's a chance he might see more opportunity without Pascal, and he's at the same price as DeGuara coming in with limited ownership, he's probably my favorite tight end outside of Ertz.
I love that call. He's kind of changing. I'm changing my outlook a little bit with him. I don't think necessarily, I mean, of course, he's more of like the guy you got to be hoping for a touchdown. Mo Alley Cox as well hasn't been on the field nearly as much, hasn't seen any target volume whatsoever here. But you take out somebody who's a wide receiver too, and there are going to be adjustments that need to be made. It could be very well Mo Alley Cox who catches a touchdown. Again, they're both like just uncertain plays, but I feel better taking shots on them now than I did 20 minutes ago. That's for sure. Is that kind of the same approach you're taking?
Yeah, 100%. And for tournaments, like you mentioned earlier with NBA, and I think the parallel is pretty clear. People just aren't going to react to this news as much. And the fact that it's a 2-game slate, perhaps there's more people that late swap because of the situation. I'm not sure. I tend to think that with all the casuals playing on Christmas, there's still going to be a pretty big edge with some of these Indianapolis players now that we did get some late news, very late news.
All right. Love it. Let's anything else for you from the tight end position? We got 9 minutes. We got to talk some defense and we'll get ourselves the heck up out of here.
Oh, my favorite conversation. No, I think we broke down tight end pretty well. I don't know if there's any questions on it, I guess throw them in the chat, but I think that's a pretty good breakdown.
All right. You guys are all the best. And because of that, I'm going to give you this. This is me doing this for you. $1 NBA Express Weekly Pass. If you want to check out our NBA product, use promo code Frosty, FROSTY. Look at me spelling and stuff. Use promo code Frosty and you can get that for $1 NBA Express Weekly Pass, which is for showdown games. So coming up here in 38 minutes, we've got the next game on the slate here for NBA. Looking forward to that. If you want to have all the tools and content to help you tackle that, use promo code Frosty, $1. That's all it is. It ends at the end of the day. So again, this is my gift to you. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. All right, let's talk defense because we have to. We're like required by law or something. Colts, Browns, Packers, Cardinals. Go into your hat, pick one.
Does ownership count, or am I picking in a vacuum?
I don't care. I hate defense so much. Just go ahead.
I think Green Bay is the safe pick.
By far.
They're going against Baker Mayfield. I mean,
yeah,
that's as safe as it gets. But from there, I do like the Cardinals. They have a good pass rush. The chat's been talking about the injuries on Indy's O-line a lot. So I think they're viable. But to your point earlier in the day, like, what is the difference between Green Bay and Cleveland? Now, Cleveland is a 7.5 point underdog. That's a major difference as far as projections. But Cleveland has a good pass rush. They have a decent secondary. They're facing Rodgers, so that's a problem. But for a super volatile position, if they're going to come in, like Green Bay right now, we have projected for 51%. If you can tell me that Cleveland's going to come in at 12 and Green Bay is going to come in at 51, I'm going to take the volatile Cleveland Browns every time.
Same Z's.
Now, I'm playing multiple lineups, so I have exposure to all of them because I'm not going to be a psychopath and play 100% Cleveland or something. But like Cleveland's just under-owned, even though they're 7.5 point underdogs.
I love crazy. I really do. So I'm fine with that. Let me finish this up. Getting my lineups in. That seems like a better idea than not having lineups in. So I'm finishing that. Oh, man. Yeah, this slate is really, really fun and enjoyable. But anything you want to touch on, overarching themes here? We got 7 minutes. I'll be able to take a couple of questions here. And again, defense for me, I'm just kind of spreading it around. That should be fun. Looking forward to it. You should be too. But anything you want to touch on here based on any of the news that we got?
I want to talk about the ancillary Green Bay situation just briefly. I saw some questions in the chat a while back about it. MVS is an important loss to this team, and I don't think it's going to matter necessarily against Cleveland, and that's reflected in the spread, but MVS plays a role in this offense that no other receiver they have can really replicate. MVS is their downfield burner. He plays primarily on the boundary, whereas Lazard and Adams have somewhat overlapping skill sets. A guy like Amari Rodgers is built more like Randall Cobb, so I don't really see him coming in and playing a majority of the snaps. One player that might see elevated time is like a Juwan Winfrey, but I don't feel great about it. Juwan Winfrey is basically like a practice squad level type player, and there's a chance that Green Bay even runs elevated rates of DeGuara and Mercedes Lewis together. I think if I'm punting completely or just throwing a flyer, it's probably Winfrey, but I don't feel good about it, and I just wanted to touch on that before we head out.
If you came in here and called a Juwan Winfrey touchdown to win somebody $1 million, you deserve like a Cadillac. You deserve a car on your front doorstep.
What's your
as
dream
soon
car,
as they
Eric?
got the money? What's
your dream car?
My dream car. Dude, I don't even know if I have one. Like, I've never been like a huge car guy. I've always thought Audis were pretty slick. I like Audis quite a bit. I like them more than I like Benzes. However, there are some, like for me, I always need an SUV because of golf clubs. Like I would never have a car. So I'm an SUV guy, if that's anything. Just future dad over here. What's your dream car? You have an answer, obviously, locked and loaded.
Yeah, Buick LeSabre. It's got to be.
Oh, man.
Like
that's
a
fascinating.
1989.
You would like a Buick LeSabre. What planet are we on? That's incredible. All right, let me finish getting all these uploaded here. We have what is happening right now in the chat? I don't even know. I always feel weird like muting political stuff because I always feel like somebody's going to be upset or think that I lean one way or another. And there's like no winning. There's no winning anymore in the world. It is just what it is.
One last thing I want to say about Green Bay is, so I don't think Juwan Winfrey's the play for like, if I was going to call our 100 yards and a touchdown thing, like Winfrey's also risky because they cleared Equanimeous St. Brown. And if there was a player on this Packers roster that can replicate MVS from a size, speed, adjusted standpoint, it's Equanimeous St. Brown. They've just given Equanimeous St. Brown a lot of chances and he's been really bad.
Oh, because he's Equanimeous St. Brown.
Hey, he's related to Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's
the
very
GOAT.
Athletic family.
USC GOAT.
Yeah, man. He's number 2 recruit in his class too. He's phenomenal. But I think Equanimeous St. Brown could be another potential flyer if you're just punting off Green Bay in the Millie type formats.
All right, I love it. I'm going to add a share just because you say things that generally happen. So that's cool. Angelic Ambition, $5 super chat. 3 minutes left, so let's get this one in for him. Pick 2, Christian Kirk, Michael Pittman, Ronald Jones, Justin Jackson, or Van Jefferson. And then QB, Heineke, Cam Newton, Mayfield. I'm assuming this is a year-long question. I'm going to assume standard scoring. So, we'll just kind of do it that way. But pick 2, Christian Kirk, Michael Pittman, Ronald Jones, Justin Jackson, Van Jefferson. Go.
I think it's probably got to be Pittman and Ronald Jones. I'm really torn with Christian Kirk.
Justin Jackson, what's his workload going to look like on Sunday? Obviously, check out NFL Live before lock tomorrow. I have a lot to figure out for this slate.
I think Ronald Jones sees a pretty good workload for an explosive offense. And then I'm kind of torn between Pittman and Kirk, but I would side with Pittman because he's just more involved.
Yeah, I probably would be too. So best of luck to you there. And then QB, Heineke, Cam Newton, or Mayfield. Cam Newton, I don't know what his snap count looks like, but I know he has rushing floor. So I like that. Heineke should be on the field every snap. Mayfield is not even a remote consideration. So Heineke or Cam Newton?
It's going to be Heineke for me.
Yeah, probably for me too, just simply because of security there. Again, you want to embrace a lot of variance, have some fun, and Cam Newton, I don't know. I just don't know what to make of it anymore. But we've got 2 minutes left here to go. We got 2 minutes left to go. Anybody else here? Christian Kirk over under 54.5 yards. I like over.
I like over.
I like over. Find some Antoine Wesley props in the world, please. Give me all of that. Inject it into my veins. Peyton Pritchard just destroying NBA. That's beautiful. I 15%, so I'm okay with it. Let's see where else we got. I don't even really know what else to say. We've got 2 minutes before lock here of the first game. Everybody enjoy some time with your family and hit that like button. I know that Matt probably has something really fancy and nice to say as we log off and go here. He generally says sentimental things out of the middle of nowhere, and it catches me way off guard. So Matt, try your best.
I'm an emotional guy. What can I say? But Merry Christmas, everybody. Thank you guys for taking the time on the holiday to watch the show. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the games and allowing Eric and I to do something we love. So thank you guys.
Yeah. And I've got to just say thank you so much to everybody. It was just over a year ago now that started doing videos, doing the Slate Starter podcast with Ryan. It's turned into a pretty cool thing for me. I've had a really, up and down year like everybody else, 2021, but I got married. I really enjoy this job. I appreciate all of you guys stopping by, talking some NBA, talking some NFL. There's literally nothing that I would rather do than help you guys win some money, than to be able to help myself win some money here too. So in that spirit, let's go out. Let's go enjoy some NBA and NFL together. Going to be a fun ride. Matt, fun as always. Really enjoyed it. Check us out again tomorrow on the NBA Live Before Lock show. That'll be enjoyable. And check out the NFL Live Before Lock show tonight. That is E-Mac and Terry coming up at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, leading you up to lock. All the news that you'll need for that Indianapolis and Arizona game. Mike, Awesemo, thank you so much. Let's get out of here. Merry Christmas.